Welcome in, everybody. Happy Friday. It's another SPL day, and it's going to be a great one. We've got a good match to start us off here. Trifecta looking to find their first victory of the first phase, and a red-hot Splyce taking them on. It's going to be a tough one for them. But joining me to talk about it here on the desk, we've got Taco. And Taco, this is going to be one that, look, Trifecta struggled. They're guaranteed to not go to MSI. Splyce, this is basically a must-win so that they can get themselves in and secure without having to worry about any of those tougher matchups later down the line.
Yeah, if anything, Trifecta really just looking to play spoiler here for Splyce, who's still trying to get their last couple of set wins to hopefully solidify themselves for MSI. But it's not going to be an easy feat, I don't think. Trifecta showed us some signs of potential yesterday, I think. And today, I'm hoping that a little bit of odd review from yesterday's set will find the team a little bit better here up against Splyce.
But on the other hand, Splyce looked phenomenal yesterday of their own. They played the other bottom-end team in Luminosity and really shellacked them pretty easily. So I think that might intimidate Trifecta a little bit here, right? I mean, they saw what happens with this team. I mean, it was 3 games that were over in the longest was, what, 28, 29 minutes or so? Everyone down the line was just playing really well.
I think Splyce has made it very clear that if you're not a team with clear direction, then you're probably going to struggle, especially in the team fighting portions of a lot of these games. But Trifecta, I think that they can play out of their mid lane now, since Moswal is a more experienced player for that role. And I think that's something that we saw a little glimpse of happening yesterday, and there was some strong early game momentum for Trifecta, but they just weren't able to hold on to it the whole way through.
Yeah, they're going to have their hands full for sure. I mean, the way that CycloneSpin in particular is playing for Splyce right now, there's so much talk around Venenu and Screammmmm and Baskin joining this roster and how well they all have played. But consistently, Cyclone may have been Splyce's best player all along. I mean, he just continues to dominate in basically every matchup you give him.
I think you can always expect a consistent performance from Cyclone as well, and when that consistency is usually on the positive side of things, it gives Splyce a lot of wiggle room to try and make plays from elsewhere. They don't have to necessarily just focus down only on that mid-jungle aspect. They have, I think, a little bit more flexibility because of how strong their side lanes actually are.
Their side lanes have been absolutely phenomenal as of late. Baskin certainly not hurting that fact, but it's really been around Cyclone and then the mid lane of Venenu. He's starting to look a lot more comfortable. And I think that not having a lot of pressure on him, knowing that Cyclone's going to do the job of the backliner, teams are in catch-22. Do we kill Cyclone and let Venenu free cast, and then he looks a lot more comfortable and starts finding a rhythm and looking like the player we know him to be? Or do we focus out Venenu, which seems to be the easier target for teams sometimes, but then let Cyclone run rampant on you? I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that there is one.
I think there's going to require a little bit more coordination between Weekend and Eonic for starters. I don't necessarily feel as though at times they're both having the greatest synergy with the releasing of their kits and CC lockdowns, but if they're able to clean it up around the edges, I do think that there is potential for punish up against Splyce, and you always have to factor in the unexpected as well. Now that Trifecta have Moswal, I think that it also opens up a little bit of diversity as far as what compositions they can opt for as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Moswal was on the Splyce team just a few weeks ago, so you know it's going to be an interesting match from the Splyce perspective. To get that perspective, we've got Kabam standing by.
All right, I'm here with Coach Kabam for Splyce. I'm getting ready for your matchup against Trifecta. I guess the first thing I want to ask you guys is, how much does, Moswal being on that team kind of change the prep for you guys as opposed to just the regular Trifecta? Does it affect you guys' game plan at all or anything like that?
No, not really. I mean, we know how he plays and everything, but he's a mid laner on a team that's still sort of trying to find their footing. So we're just kind of going in it knowing what gods that we knew Moswal liked to play when we were with him, but it doesn't look like it's quite the same as it was. So it's just another mid laner, another game.
Well, when you're going up against a team like this that's been struggling and looks like they're willing to kind of try anything, does that make it harder for you all to kind of, or especially for you, because you're kind of coming with the game plan to try and know what to focus on, or do you just try and tell the guys to focus on their own thing?
I generally like the team to focus on their own thing. I think the interesting thing about yesterday's set and today's set is that they can play spoiler now. Like, there's not a lot of weight on their shoulders, so I think that can make them kind of dangerous because they can do whatever they want. Like, if they just take games randomly, it could be really bad. So I like everyone to come in focused and ready to do what they want to do.
Well, it seemed like the team has been really focused around objectives. The Frenzy's really helped out with that too. Is that like a play style for you guys, or is that just what's been working and you guys will just do whatever works?
Yeah, it's probably the second one. It feels good, looks good, it works out in our favor most of the time. So until it doesn't, that's what we're doing. I don't know.
Sure. Well, the last thing I want to check in on you, I obviously have to check on this. How's Munch doing? I assume that there will be some celebratory pictures if you guys win with Munch for me to enjoy later.
Yeah, of course. Ever since his recent ban, he's been struggling at home whenever we go to play, and we've played a few sets in a row. So, but he's hanging in there. He has a toy every day. You know, good luck.
Good. Glad to hear that Munch, the Splyce dog, is doing well. Then again, this is Kumbhakarna, coach for Splyce. We'll get it back over to the desk.
Thank you, guys. Munch, always the most important news item for Splyce at any given time. Look, this team, they seem to be meshing really, really well together. I think that Finch's point about the frenzy and their objective focus is one that is well taken. I mean, it reminds me of a team that shoots a lot of three-pointers. It works until it doesn't, and then if it's the important games, the important sets, then that can really come back to bite you.
You have to keep in mind, though, that Splyce is a team where that objective play has gotten them in trouble a couple of times before in past matches from previous sets. So I don't think it's all as clear-cut as Frenzy could seem to be around objective play. While it does give a little bit of an advantage, you never know when a team is willing to take an engagement. And in my eyes, I think Trifecta has a little bit more of the surprise factor because of what Kumbhakarna just mentioned. There's really no pressure on this team. Sure, these results are going to carry over into the future phases, but for the most part, at Trifecta, they're really at their own will here.
Exactly. They can do basically whatever they want, and that includes giving guys like Ducky some of these weird picks. We've seen him play Nox solo lane before, and honestly did pretty well with it. I mean, overall, Trifecta, I think, just coming in loose and going in with something a little bit off the wall is a good idea for them.
I just hope we see Ducky on a soft winning matchup for once this year, man. I do think that Ducky hasn't done an awful job by any means in that solo lane, especially when you factor in how difficult it seems at times that Trifecta makes that solo lane for him. And I think today, against somebody like Baskin, you can't really afford to have a losing matchup there in solo. No,
Baskin has been playing a lot of different stuff over there in the solo lane and has been fairly dominant on it, though he does have some gods that are a little bit lower pressure. The Amaterasu, the Sobek that he played yesterday, those are gods that I think that Ducky might be able to exploit at some point. But you're right. I mean, this Trifecta team, a lot of times it's felt like has just said, hey, Ducky, you're going up against King Arthur today, or Achilles today, or Osiris today. And we're okay with that. Hope you are too. And that can be difficult for a solo laner.
No, I think that Ducky is oftentimes left in a little bit of no man's land out there in solo islands. And, well, if Trifecta were to, I think, accommodate a little bit more towards Ducky, he might be able to bring some aggression towards these team fights that could catch Splyce off guard.
That's true. I mean, Trifecta, a little bit of a tough day yesterday, but then at night, Eonic riding high after a Raptors win, a Toronto native, so maybe they can carry some of that momentum in today. But their newest mid laner, Moswal, the former Splyce player, we're going to have his thoughts on playing his former team.
All right, I'm now here with Moswal, formerly of Splyce, but now here with Trifecta as the middle laner. I guess that's the first thing I should ask you about then, right? I mean, is there any extra, feelings when you're going up against the old squad at all? I mean, it's barely any of the same guys, really, from that team. So is there anything extra for you when you go up against Splyce?
Not really. I still like all of them as people. They're really good friends.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear everyone's still getting along. Well, what about on this team? It feels like a lot of the identity for this team is like early picks and that early aggression, but that sometimes you guys have some trouble translating it over. Is that how you all see it, and what kind of stuff are you trying to do to maybe carry some of that into the later game too?
We just mainly need to get more practice because we only got to play for like 4 days. But we'll get better over time for sure.
It definitely looks like the team has done better and has looked better since you've come on there too. What's been like the team environment for you here working with these guys? I mean, has it been a good environment for you? Have you been having fun with them?
Yeah, that's basically all I wanted. I just wanted to have fun playing SMITE again, and I didn't really get that on Splyce for a while, so that's basically it.
All right, well then I know that you've been playing a lot of SMITE. Anything other than that you've been enjoying or playing, Moswal, that you've just been kind of having some fun with?
Little bit of Diablo on the side. Okay. Waiting for Classic WoW, the usual.
Well, everyone's excited for that one then. Okay, so you get some W's in and have some time hopefully to get some classic WoW in there. All right, well, always good to have a chance to talk with you then, Moswal. We just heard from Splyce a little while ago. I'll get it back over to the desk, let them break everything else down.
Yeah, Moswal definitely a man who just wants to have fun. That's all he ever says. Anytime you want to talk to him, he's like, yeah, I could be playing this, but I have more fun playing Opwash and just pressing 4. That's fun for him. That's kind of his whole mentality, is just being in a space where he feels like he's having the most fun.
Moswal has always been, I think, a fairly positive individual and usually contributes to a friendly team environment. At least that seems to be the kind of gist that his transition over to Trifecta has led me to assume from the last time that I spoke to him also. But I'm really excited to see what happens here, though, because Moswal does have familiarity with Splyce and some of their strategies that, if he has that little bit of insight left, I mean, Splyce are probably aware of this, probably trying to make readjustments so that Trifecta can't look to exploit those.
It's a good point. As we're ready for picks and bans, we'll see if Moswal can lend some of that expertise on his former teammates. Though Finch made a good point. I mean, it's only Aror and CycloneSpin that were his teammates on this squad. So he's got some ideas around the duo lane, but everything else is kind of up for grabs as Trifecta look directly towards that duo lane right away and ban away Auror's RDO and CycloneSpin's Freya.
But Hercules still on the board, and that is something that Aror has also loved taking for support, just because of how unabashedly aggressive you're allowed to be throughout that early to mid game and how much you can really influence the map pressure. Jormungandr, though, has a smart secondary ban response there from Splyce. Could probably assume that Trifecta were looking to first pick it, but without that on the table, it's got to be the Hercules, because Trifecta don't want Splyce to have it.
Exactly, and this could go for solo lane, could go for support, though I feel like I've been saying that a ton, and it is yet to go to the solo lane, but maybe Trifecta will bring it there. Chronos, the lock-in for Splyce alongside Erlang, Shen, 2 quick selections. Chronos could be going to the mid lane for Venenu, but I feel like putting CycloneSpin on this Magical Hunter is the idea.
It's ambiguous for both as well, because the Erlang Shen I don't think is guaranteed either for jungle, solo, or support just yet. So Splyce trying to utilize, I think, some of their player flexibility on multiple gods, because even the Chronos, like you just said, aggro, could be for ADC, could be for mid lane for Venenu, but I like both the Chronos and the Erlang in responses to the Hercules, because both of them have forms or ways to interrupt the Driving Strike, the Earthbreaker combo, and just prevent Hercules from being as much of a nuisance.
Now, neither builds anti-heal particularly well, though Erlang isn't horrible with it. You can build Toxic Blade or Brawler's Beat Stick, and it can be fairly effective either way. Chronos probably not going to buy a Divine Ruin, but can end up chunking through that healing anyways some of the time. Is Trifecta now thinking about where they want to go next? I mentioned that Trifecta respect bans Moswal's former teammates in the RDO and Freya, but Splyce, looking at their former teammate, also took away Moswal's Merlin, which isn't too much of a surprise. Jing Osiris gives us the information that this will be Hercules support, I imagine, and Osiris going to the solo lane.
Ducky having an aggressive laning matchup, I thought I'd never see the day, but Trifecta, I think, gotta feel confident with that Jing Osiris lock-in. They've got a decent bit of frontline, although they could be lacking in some hard crowd control. Need a little bit more setup in my mind, aggro, to really emphasize this Jingwei's damage output, because Jingwei, she can buy into the crit, and I think so far Chronos, Erlang, those aren't necessarily gods that will prevent Jingwei from being able to build into crit efficiently, but I just think that it's important to have Jingwei for the turtle knockup form from the Erlang, and
Sure.
not only that, but to have some hyper carry potential to deal with this Chronos in the late game.
Yeah, that Chronos can be such a lane bully as well, so that extra safety that Jingwei provides, we bring it up every time she gets locked in. Kumbhakarna the pick here for Aror, and that's one of those gods that can lock down Jingwei despite all of her safety. Also can be a real nuisance for Hercules. I mean, he hits the 2-on-up carry, but then he gets Mez, can't driving strike, feels a lot worse. So this is an Aror special, just a god that harasses enemy backlines and front lines pretty well.
You don't get to play Hercules against Aror without having to deal with some repercussions. After all, the man has been doing Hercules support for, I don't know, as long as we can probably remember here. But Morgan going to be a nice third ban selection here for Splyce, and I think that's smart considering that Trifecta already showed Moswal likes that Morgan.
Yes, loves to play that and can really make plays with it, so a smart ban here from Splyce. I imagine they'll be looking a lot at their former teammate to try and ban him out in this second phase. You could also look at something that Weekend plays. Serket was a really popular ban against him in the early stages of the season, has not really been the case since then, so maybe that's some way they could look But it looks like it will be the Ratatosker ban instead. But I think early game jungler taking that away from Weekend is the right sort of idea.
Ratatosker also has that soft global threatening presence for the Erlang and the Chronos, and the fact that through the Cosmos can possibly interrupt with Chronos trying to successfully get off the rewind could just prove to be a little bit too problematic for Splyce to want to deal with it. But with Ratatosker being off the board, Ravana still a perfectly eligible pick here for Trifecta. Also has some decent tools, I think, at trying to deal with the Kumbhakarna and the Chronos and their CC.
Now Splyce has a couple options. I mean, I think you're right to highlight the CC they already have. They've got a ton of it. And if they want to put Erlang in the solo lane and pick up something like a Batz, I mean, I don't know how you ever have purification beads up against this composition. Maybe Baskin wants something a little bit different. He could go back to the Amaterasu, I think is a good pick here, and layers on even some more CC. Because you've got decent enough early game if Erlang Shen goes in the jungle. And Osiris is going to bully out basically anybody anyways, so you can kind of turtle up and take that Amma and take it for the late game team fight.
I was thinking maybe a Bologna even, just to introduce some protections from the Eagles rally, since there is, I think, going to be a decent amount of early to mid game presence between an Erlang and a Bologna, but the Muzen being hovered instead, and if this is locked in, I'm fairly certain that's got to be for Venenu in the mid lane, and that Chronos is definitely intended for duo, which could put some pressure on Trifecta now that they've taken this Jing, because Jing can get a little bit bullied out by the Chronos in lane.
Man, this is such a good pick, I think. I mean, it's risky against a god like Hercules and like Osiris that AMC can have trouble getting away from, but you've got such great setup from Kumbhakarna and Erlang Shen that if Eonic is on this Hercules and ever gets near this AMC, a Stinger basically guarantees the kill. You take away Driving Strike from Hercules and it's very, very hard for him to survive. I love this AMC selection. He's been super potent and one that really we usually don't see these days because he's banned away so often.
Something tells me that Hercules is probably going to need a blink for the start at least. Levels 1 through 12, there's probably some room for punish against that Muzen if Trifecta elects for the blink option there. So I don't think it's necessarily a guaranteed shutdown, but I am leaning a little bit more towards your direction there, Aggro. I do feel as though that Muzen could be a pretty scary look there for Trifecta to try and deal with, but the Batz actually being checked over right now by Trifecta. It would introduce, I think, the hard crowd control that this draft is kind of lacking right now.
And they've got great AoE if they lock in that Raijin as well, and they do, but Raijin has really fallen off the popularity train as of late. Moswal played it yesterday, Joshi played it yesterday as well, but overall, we haven't seen a lot of the top teams picking this god anymore. He's kind of fallen off for the wayside.
I think a lot of teams have just recognized that while Raijin can deal a lot of damage with Percussive Storm early on, it's just not enough when trying to actually escape in a team fight. There's multiple flank opportunities, especially nowadays with a lot of these high mobility comps. Chronos, Erlang, Kumbha, already 3 gods that I think can punish a Raijin pretty heavily.
Pretty easily at that, I agree with you. Splyce has one more pick to go. You imagine it's for solo laner. And it is going to be the Amaterasu for Baskin. Low pick rate, fairly high win rate. That's because Baskin's been playing it quite a bit. So Splyce has a ton of CC, great late game potential between the Chronos and the AMC. Are you worried at all about their AoE teamfight damage? Because they are a little bit single target.
Normally I would be, but because of the Kumbhakarna, I'm not. Because Kumbha, I think, is going to introduce some really interesting zone control that's going to be problematic for Trifecta to consistently land their AoE damage.
Yeah, if Trifecta can group up as 5 early on, maybe take advantage of their great teamfight composition, might be able to make something happen, but Splyce certainly going to make it difficult for them. Game 1 of our first Friday set about to start. Let's throw it over to the casters for them to take it away.
Thanks, Aggro. Thanks, Taco. It's Finch and Anatoly here as we move into Game 1 between Trifecta and Splyce. Who do you think's going to win? Make sure you let us know. And Trifecta, I like their draft. It makes some sense. They were a little bit control light at the beginning, so you get Raijin and Batz, and that covers it. But it's tough, man. I mean, they're still up against Splyce.
They are, but Raijin comfort pick for Moswal. Right. That's what led to their success in Season 5, playing against their former teammates. I don't think that there's any issue for Moswal. No bad blood between those two. It's only Aror and CycloneSpin.
Yeah, from what he was saying, it sounds like he's definitely still considering himself friends with those guys on the team, and that he, doesn't hold any ill will towards them. So I imagine there'll just be some straight up smite between these two teams. For the most part, though, everything going where we expected it to. Eonic will be on that Hercules in the support role. And the only question for me is that it feels like Trifecta are kind of doubling down on what they struggled with the other day, which is that they've got these 2 warriors. That's great for the early game, but I mean, if they don't get off to a good start, aren't they in trouble?
A little bit, I think. The Warriors definitely needing to pop off, and if they don't, I think Amaterasu out of Baskin is going to carry more weight than the 2 Warriors, but Splyce were thinking about doing something cheeky, looking at the ward at the purple buff, really trying to catch somebody slipping out of position, maybe Eonic, but it was only Wowy. He was safe under his own tower, spotting that out.
And remember, it's been so long, or not even that long, but the change where you get that extra movement speed when you move from the fountain. And I was wondering if it would enable some more plays kind of like that, because you can get out there, ward back, and still move back out pretty quickly with that, and maybe your team has some opportunities, but looks like Trifecta, or rather Splyce, didn't find much there.
And Splyce is the team that's going to be innovative to make those strategies. At Worlds, they did a 3-on-2 strategy, bringing over Divios from the solo lane, still using his teleport to make an impact in the duel lane to start, not losing any minions in that solo lane. And in the current Season 6 meta, where there's a 2-on-2 in the solo lane and your hunters are left to their own devices in duel lane, that ward from Splyce is going to be able to identify if Weaken is going for an early level 2 gank on the Hun Batz, because you don't know if he started for the Blink or the Beads, and Weaken known for making early plays, having 4 First Bloods thus far in Season 6.
It's the kind of thing Weaken likes to do, as it looks like everyone at home favoring Splyce. They're probably right, just based on their performance in these 2 teams so far. As Eonic and Ducky don't initially go to wave here in solo, they go grab the blue buff away from Splyce and now meet them back here in lane. Maybe a bit worried about some of the Kumbhakarna pressure, but Weaken's making a rotation over. He'll meet Aror here in the jungle, and maybe a Weaken backs off.
Well, level 1 Kumbhakarna is not too threatening, but a level 2 Erlang Shen certainly is, trying to get his own back camps. This is how Weaken is looking for these playmaking opportunities, trying to make that 2-on-2 with an Osiris, by the way, for Trifecta, into a more powerful 3-on-2, being able to capitalize on Ducky having now his 2nd blue buff. Really hurts Baskin in the short term. I don't think it's going to hurt him long term, because this kind of a player is always going to be able to find farm out of nowhere.
Scream the aggressor now into Weaken's jungle, kind of daring him to come take this fight. You talked about the potential for an early Weaken gank, but I mean, Unbon's and Erlang Shen, if they're both level 2, you take the Erlang Shen like every time, and that's probably why Weaken didn't want to step up there and try and contest those camps. Instead, they'll get some mid pressure, but can't quite find the pull onto Aror.
3-way splitting actually hurts all of Trifecta in the long run. Weaken still level 2, Scream level 3, despite having more Assassin's Blessing stacks for Weaken, more efficient in the jungle, not as efficient in terms of farming, because Scream was only 2-way splitting the mid wave.
Right, so that ends up working out maybe slightly better than for Splyce on the back end of that fight, as Ducky finally in a matchup where he can, you know, stretch his legs out a little bit, and like they upgraded him on an airplane to a more comfortable seat or something like that. He so often, I feel like, takes low pressure gods into the solo lane and can have a hard time. Now he can kind of push Baskin back in these early levels and you know, have a good time over here in the solo lane.
It's been about since the 2nd week up against SK where Ducky hasn't had a more dominant matchup, where he was playing the King Arthur against Belair's Camazotz, and even then it was like back and forth between those two. Since then, he's always had to face off against the King Arthur. And now with the Osiris pick, Ducky needs to look for some aggressive plays. Not able to steal away the blue buff, but maybe try to squeeze more Totem of coups. If he can get at least 7 or 8 before the 15-minute mark, that's going to be a good look to get at least 1,000 gold lead for Trifecta.
And for the squad, as Venenu might be in some trouble, manages to avoid some of the damage coming out from Moswal, and now they look for turnaround potential. Weaken low on mana, low on HP as well, but the kill potential not quite there. Though with Scream lurking around, if he can find a pen, instead though he'll just continue to move in the jungle, but Eonic has had a beat on this entire time.
Trying to look for the steal is Scream. Good driving strike from Eonic, not allowing Scream to take advantage of Weaken having to back, and Weaken's back was untimely. As a jungler, you don't really want to back until you finish off your Talaria boots, more than likely, just to be able to get that movement speed. So this is why Scream is going to continue the pressure.
They know that Scream is still here, though. The pings are coming out on the map. Well timed, though, from Scream to strip it away. That must be frustrating if you're on the side of Trifecta, as he continues to be a nuisance here in the jungle.
That has got to be the most unfortunate thing. From a safe position, no risk, very high reward coming out of Scream. Not only benefiting from it, but crippling Ducky and Eonic, and also benefiting Baskin. being able to maybe go there to pick up the blue buff. He really has nothing else to do. He probably should go for it.
Yeah, especially with the Osiris backing here. I am almost a little bit surprised he doesn't, but it looks like maybe he wants to try and clear the wave first. Meanwhile, Ducky might not be hurt too bad by it. Looks like this is the back timing he wanted for the most part. Picks up the Glad Shield and should be able to teleport back into lane A-OK. It even elects to grab some wards too, so that way he'll have some more information about if Scream is lurking on this side of the map.
I mean, they knew he was trying to invade the back camps. Even if they didn't have a ward initially, they knew that he was kind of in the right side of the map vicinity, so they should have had the idea that the steal was evident, but both of their backs were turned. I don't think that he was visible on the mini-map being behind the rock, so a good opportunity coming out of Scream. Always looking for the opportunities, much like Weekend was at the beginning of the game.
Well, Splyce have grabbed their own red buff, and Trifecta's has just come up, but Splyce won't have a chance to group up for the steal. Looks like Trifecta will be able to get there in time. So they'll go for the Oracles instead, but a good play by Wowy. Make sure that neither squad gets both. He at least snags one, and the teams fall back. But this still, I mean, it's early, it's 5:30, but this feels a little bit slower than Trifecta usually play. Maybe that's why Splyce are the ones hitting the gas. Eonic gets caught out, a great three-man rotation. Moswal wants to answer back onto Venenu and is not able to find enough hits.
He missed one of those 4 shots. If he hits the 4th one, maybe Thunder crashes in. He could get the kill, but that would be a 2-for-1, not favoring in Splyce as a mid laner. You don't want to sacrifice yourself because you're going to miss out on too much farm. And Caster's Curse Finch, as soon as you said it was a slow game to start, immediate blink engage out of Aror. The cripple follow-up from Venenu prevents Eonic from driving strike defensively, and that's something that Aror really favors, is this blink relic. It almost doesn't matter what support he's playing.
Yeah, he's picked it up largely to his team's benefit, but even sometimes to his detriment. It's definitely something that he likes to use. Weekend has the Fear No Evil forced out. The boulder comes through from downtown. What a shot from Eonic. And good work there by Weekend. The two of them work together to finally punish the over-aggressive Scream in the jungle. And yeah, the aggression happened in that middle lane right when I was not expecting it, but I wanted it to be Trifecta even more than Splyce, who went aggressive, and Splyce are the beneficiaries.
Baskin, what a smart play. He actually just uses ultimate to not only cancel effect the stun tether, but just to clear the wave and disengage, knowing that Eonic was about to come around the corner. And to talk about the gank from Scream, too aggressive, like you were talking about.
He wanted to be there for blue buff, right?
He didn't have his ultimate. He used it to try to kill Eonic, which was successful, but against a Hun Batz where you started off Blink, no CC immunity in the Erlang Shen kit.
Right.
Even without Eonic's boulder, I think he's still dead there.
There's definitely a good chance, because he was in that control for a good while. You got to admit the boulder did some good work as Eonic wants to try and stop them from doing this blue buff. They made a point of this earlier on as Scream gets pulled back in. Remember, still no purification beads available, and Ducky finds another kill. There's that early aggression from Trifecta as they go for the blue buff invade. Splyce now struggling as their jungler falls twice in a row.
And meanwhile, in the dual lane, they're just left to their own devices, farming it away. Looking to play a little aggressive was CycloneSpin, not able to really strip away that red buff. Baskin didn't have his ultimate to defend that blue buff, and yet again, without CC immunity, an easy pick. Eonic, very clutch pull into the push combo.
Do you ever think that old hunters like Young Bay or something like that, they get old manny about how easy hunters have it nowadays, or they're just able to chill in duo lane without having to worry about ganks or anything like that? They're gonna be the highest level in the game all the time. Back in my day, you know, you had Hercules is in lane all the time and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe you get some of that.
I'm kind of like that right now in the solo lane. I'm like, get out of my yard, kid.
Weekend absolutely gets out of that yard. Scream takes him down. Much better to be on the other side of the CC chain, I imagine.
Yeah, this is not a good look for both of these junglers that started off Blink, because honestly, they haven't made Blink plays at the 8-minute mark yet, or defensively, honestly. The one time I saw Weekend use his Blink was actually to farm effectively at level 1, trying to, min-max that timer, but outside of that, they're getting abused without the CC immunity, but still making plays where it matters. Splyce able to capitalize by grouping up, whereas Trifecta did the same thing at the blue buff. It all depends on where the vision control is and how you could exploit it.
Yeah, it feels almost like two boxers who don't have their guard up, right? They're just kind of trading blows, and whoever comes out on top between these two junglers right now without beads. So whoever kind of starts the CC chain likely will win the fight. And I've been impressed with Eonic throughout this early game so far. He's really hit some nice pulls, some nice driving strikes, and been there when the team needs him. I wonder if they're going to need him right now around these mid-camps. Aror, the early target. Fear No Evil is available as Weaken still holds it. He finally drops it onto Aror. He's clearly the target, but Ven gets Weaken way in the back line.
Aror going to be able to revive from the Sleepy Time passive. Baskin making his rotation. Gonna stun out Ducky. Actually forces out Lord of the Afterlife. And that play out of Weaken, he just put his back to the rest of the team.
Yeah.
They wanted to kill Aror, but he's baiting himself out on purpose because of the Sleepy Time passive. They want to sacrifice Kumbhakarna. Even if you do get him in the passive, then you have to invest about 8 basic attacks.
Yeah.
And the turnaround potential is so great that Splyce was just destined to continue the chase.
It was really that Weaken committed the jump. I have to imagine the idea was to try and get behind Aror and force him back towards the mid-camps with the ultimate, which did work. He was able to isolate Aror, but because he had to commit the jump to do it, I mean, he was dead to rights on the backside. No way out for the Unbat.
You know what it was? I think it was actually to avoid the Mez.
Maybe so, yeah.
He did jump at the same time as the Mez, but the positioning put himself really awkwardly. Maybe if he just jumped up and down.
Yeah, straight up and down maybe.
And then used the ultimate, he would have been safer, but instead making a risky play happen. Also, he could have used that ultimate earlier. He didn't have to do it after the jump. I think even if he gets mezzed, the ulti still goes off, and there's that potential to kill Aror. And if it goes south, at least you have your jump to disengage. But not because you used it, there's nowhere for you to go. You're in combat, you can't blink away.
Ends up being a small win there for Splyce, and I mean it. I mean, take a look at the gold in this game so far. Really still very close between these squads. Experience slightly more so in Splyce's favor, and that's certainly worth noting. But this is not too bad a spot for Trifecta. I imagine they'd like to be a little bit in the lead because they went for this aggressive warrior in the support role. But, I mean, you still have Unbat, you still have a Jing just kind of cooking in the oven, and Moswal on this Raijin. I mean, they're not going to go away in this late game by any means.
No, definitely not in terms of Trifecta, but at the flip side for Splyce, you got to worry about this Amaterasu late game. That's going to be a big problem, especially with the Chronos. Think about all the attack speed that Chronos provides. With the movement speed, Baskin is going to accelerate for CycloneSpin. And honestly, with the pick of the Osiris for Ducky, I'm a little surprised that he's only been able to get 4 Totem of Coups extra for that 500 gold. I thought it would be at least 6 or 7 by this point.
But he has not been able to find those openings. I'm very interested if Aurora is going to pick up that frenzy. It's been something Splyce has been doing almost every game, and with a Muzen Cobb and a Chronos, I mean, totally, that is going to shred. And they've been doing it really well. Sometimes they don't even use it for the objective. They use it for the fights, and it's so difficult to deal with as Wowy has to use the ultimate.
He would rather use the ultimate than the purification beads to avoid that stun. He knew the timer was coming afterwards, but CycloneSpin too good, still going to hit it at the end of the day. And that second relic slot from Aror, it's not just Aror that likes it, it's also PBM out of Rival.
Sure.
That definitely favors it. Yesterday, I believe it was, against LG, that Splyce game, I think it was game 3, where they burned the Fire Giant in 3 seconds.
So
flat.
quick.
Like, there was nothing LG could do about it. But in this game particular, with Aurora already investing in Blink, I don't think they necessarily need the Frenzy. They might need ways to survive the initial burst from Moswal, so I would like to see a shell from Aurora.
It would certainly be nice in this game as Wowy's in some trouble. Remember, he's already used the ultimate, and Scream certainly knows it. Great beads from Wowy, though, gets him away from the 9 turns Blessing. But Scream, though, even without the kill, can feel good about the gank. They force the beads, and they force Wowy back.
And they have the timer now. Got to type in that 160-second timer. Look for round number 2. The Blink, much shorter of a cooldown. That's the first Blink play that I've seen out of Scream. Took a little while to start, but better late than never, and especially if they can find this next pick onto Wowy, CycloneSpin is definitely going to force the Gold Fury. And once Splyce gets one objective, it feels like they just can never be stopped.
It's because they're able to use the momentum that gives them in a really strong way. And I don't mean momentum as this sort of abstract thing. I mean the fact that it forces you out of position to come defend, get you to stop farming, and in that moment, maybe when your team's not communicating perfectly, they can recognize your weakness. Is it a tower that you guys aren't in a position to defend? Can Pyromancer be stolen now? That's the sort of thing I mean when I say that they play with that momentum so well. And they do, like you say, do that very well off the back of objectives.
Wanted to talk about these mid builds for a little bit. Venenu going for a heavy physical power build, which makes a lot of sense on a Muzen Cobb having as much scaling as he does. A very short cooldown on your Stinger once you pick it back up. And then, surprisingly enough, the Talaria shoes, something that we've seen from soul laners that opt not to go teleport like Baskin has this game, but not so much out of your mid laner. So really taking advantage of the hives, because that's his only escape on the Muzen Cup, is your movement speed, so you gotta accelerate it some more.
Trifecta's going to have a hard time disengaging this game, man. I mean, with the way that Venenu, Scream, and Baskin, and then Aror and CycloneSpin, too. I mean, CycloneSpin obviously with the Accelerate and Baskin's Aura for the whole squad. They'll be zooming, especially, I mean, Scream picks up the Wing Blade. Clearly, the plan from Splyce is to go fast. And Trifecta, their best tool to get away from that, probably the Fear No Evil, and they only have one. This could potentially get tough for them.
And speaking of fast, I'm surprised Trifecta didn't go for Shield of Regrowth onto Eonic, knowing that that's kind of why you pick Hercules. It's like you want to put yourself a little bit faster to get the initial pull. And now Eonic trying to put himself in a position, has to use the boulder to get CC immunity.
And Weekend comes on the backside, but a great epic uppercut from Aror leaves him in a bad spot. He gets deleted, but Wowy and Moswal team up to take down Venenu to make it 1-for-1 jungle for mid laner. But it's Splyce who are still aggressing forward, forcing the Thunder Crash from Moswal. That means Scream can go in immediately. Beads have already come down, but Moswal's been isolated. Another nice pick, 2-for-1 Splyce.
Looking for Eonic as well. Time Rift going to get avoided by the Driving Strike. Now Baskin making the rotation, whereas no sign of life out of Ducky quite yet. Eonic without the Excavate, not much steal potential. Keep in mind, Baskin has the Dazzling offensive.
And Eonic, yeah, really can't do much here, so he's just got to go. In fact, if Baskin just sits on him with this 5-level lead, there's kill potential there, so Splyce grabbed the Gold Fury quite easily on the back end of a well-won fight. And this is just the way that Splyce plays. I mean, yes, it was a 2-for-1 on paper. That's not a huge win in terms of the fight, but they were the ones with all the positional control. They take the objective, and just like that, they're out in front.
And Weekend yet again getting abused without Purification Beats. He's still level 11. He doesn't have access to that second relic slot, but while he was in the air from Aror, Venenu definitely tunnel visioning way too hard on that kill. I think he misses the Stinger before Weekend lands. And then number 2, he has his side turned to the rest of the action to the point where Wowy knocks up Venenu, gets off the airstrike, and kills Venenu because the Beats was a little too late. Aegis was still on cooldown, so Venenu dies mid-air. Needs to clean that up this set.
A little bit more to work on there for Splyce, certainly. As in the picks and bans, I remember they were talking a little bit about how with the Chronos and the Erlang Shen, they might have some trouble getting that anti-heal out there. Fortunately, though, Venenu on the Muzen Cobb going to be real good at it. I imagine that's why he's picked up this Brawler's Beatstick Man. Between those, the honey, between the bees, he'll be able to keep that kind of thing ticking constantly. Going to be really difficult for Eonic in particular to get maximum heal value out this game. And not the only thing interesting in terms of builds. The Frenzy absolutely did come through here for Aror. I'm with you totally. A defensive relic makes a lot of sense to me, but you know they're really valuing their ability to burn those objectives.
And normally, if you're going to go Frenzy on a support, it's because somebody else is picking up the shell, but that's not the case for Baskin.
Right.
He's opted for the Purification Beats, but that's something that he's been doing consistently since his return to the SPL.
Splyce get the Pyromancer, Scream now in a bit of trouble. Fear No Evil comes out, but they don't get a ton of value from the initial usage. Baskin now with the Dazzling offensive, but they trade stun for stun. It looks like Splyce from their positioning are done here. They got what they wanted, and Trifecta could not punish, so they just disengage.
They're getting one objective on the left, continuing that kind of pressure on the right. Splyce with a little bit of an advantage, but it's not as much as you would think that these teams are lopsided, because Trifecta, yes, they don't have any set wins, but their only game wins are against Space Station Gaming, having 2 games. They've been shut out by every other team. So Splyce had a very strong game yesterday against LG, winning each game about 23, 24 minutes. Not having that same kind of success against Trifecta, but a good momentum start.
Not too far away from that now as Aror looks for Weekend, and yet again he's bullied. He had the beads that time and looks like he used them. It just was not enough. He gets deleted. Frenzy now coming out to make sure they can not only burn the tower but win the fight. Eonic, the initial target, does get 1 heal off but stunned. Ducky comes in on the backside to try and slow things down, but the tier 1 tower, a distant memory, and Splyce still with their feet on the gas.
Still looking for Ducky. He's going to get stunned out, forced to use the Lord of the Afterlife. Moswal getting silenced out. He used those beads just engaged from the tier 1 tower, and with 2 quick picks, Splyce able to get 2,000 gold just like that, Finch.
And this is what you're talking about with the way they play off of Gold Furies. This is why I mentioned momentum. It is a real thing. I know it always sounds sort of like this concept, just like, well, they won last game, maybe they'll win the next one. It's that truly in the game, when you lose a fight, you're kind of reeling in a way from it. Your team has staggered respawns, you're trying to get back in, your cooldowns aren't there, you don't have position on the map, and Splyce play with all those factors, I feel like, so well.
when you're at a position like Weekend was, getting picked off, it's very easy to siege those tier 2 towers. Like, once he landed, he couldn't even jump away by using the beads. He just died. And the only investment that Splyce had to do on that kill was the epic uppercut. Every other important cooldown was still saved, allowing them to keep forcing out these ultimates.
Ducky was real patient with the Lord of the Afterlife, but gets over the wall with it and should be A-okay. Tier 1 tower on the right is the next one that's in trouble. As Splyce, 5 men strong, push down, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that they have a Fire Giant buff around their waist. They certainly do not. This has just been Splyce grouping up and fighting with their lead around that frenzy. Very often Aror gets Relic Dagger, but he might not even need it. Eonic does get pulled back in, gets the heal off, and a good Fear No Evil creates some space. He throws the boulder back through too, and that brings Baskin down low, but Splyce still healthy enough to start looking for Ducky.
Ducky gonna land back from the epic uppercut. Scream receiving the heal from the Nine's Turn's Blessing, not finding a pick onto Eonic because of the great Fear No Evil from Weekend, separating the team fight. Man, that cripple from Venenu felt like forever for Eonic.
Splyce, they'll re-engage. They want Ducky to get things started. Lord of the Afterlife aggressively towards the back line. My man is brave, but he ends up paying for it. Ducky goes down, but it cost Aror his life as well. But there's the Venenu damage. CycloneSpin gets the last hit. 2 for 1 for Splyce.
That time stop into Venenu. Swarm just eliminates Weekend. He still only had 20 seconds remaining on those beats, playing frontline as an assassin. Not the place to be, especially against a late game Chronos and a Muzen Cobb Trifecta. Still able to hold on to their tier 2 tower. A good sacrifice from the 2 frontliners.
I think so too, and Trifecta showing Splyce they can't quite do it for free here, Totally. They showed a show of force on the right-hand side, keeping that tier 2 tower standing, but Oni Fury will be the cost for it. This should certainly go to Splyce. Closest person is Wowy, and he's nowhere nearby. Even still, they will claim this objective. But now what does Trifecta need to do to try and slow down this snowball that's slowly building up for Splyce?
It's hard. They need to make sure, number one, that the Fire Giant isn't going to get sneaked away very quickly with the Frenzy, trying to make sure at least that they keep their eyes and ears open. Once that Splyce started, Trifecta can at least look for a steal with the Excavate from a safe distance, not to commit under there, to maybe also allow Moswal the Taiko drum steal potential. Keep Wowy farming on the left-hand side. That's the win condition for Trifecta. The late-game Jing damage needs to be there. Not only that, Moswal, he's level 15. He needs to play catch-up.
He needs some farm too, but out comes the Frenzy. This is what he does so well. Boulder couldn't get there in time, and Splyce secured the objective. And now it's time to run for Trifecta. But remember, Splyce are so fast. I don't know if you can run fast enough. Ducky goes down first. Splyce still wanting more, though. Tier 2 tower in right, certainly coming down.
And Weekend's going to split push in mid, not even able to get this tier 1 tower. He needs to play defense on the Phoenix with that Fear No Evil. You give Splyce 5 seconds, maybe even 3. They're going to strip away the Fire Giant with the Frenzy.
That's what we're talking about. We're trying not to let them grab it for free, but it's easier said than done. Such a difficult task as Moswal's damage is forced into Aror, who shrugs it off. Eonic trying his best to frontline, but knocked up by Scream and killed by Scream. That's a killing spree as right side Phoenix goes down. Weekend just barely gets the ultimate off and back into his fountain. He's joined by Wowy and Moswal, but Splyce are looking to end this game right here, right now, Totally. They're already into the Titan room.
5 minutes ago, this game was not that out of control for Trifecta, but Splyce, they get one objective, and now they're going to get the Titan.
They're moving in for it already, well below half HP, and Trifecta can't do enough. Scream gets Wowy, and the game goes down for Splyce in just about 23 minutes. That happened all of a sudden, Totally.
It really did. I think that the Chronos late game alongside Amaterasu, the 2 opposite end side laners started rotating for team fights. Splyce's composition was just too much to handle for how far behind Weekend was without his bees, how far behind Moswal was having to disengage and sacrificing a lot of farm. There needs to be an evaluation of how you utilize Weekend in the jungle, because he was rotating a lot in the early game, but he never really made the plays that he needed.
That's right. There were a couple of fights where just a few things kind of slipped up Trifecta here, which maybe is a little bit they can try and build on. The Gold Fury fight comes to mind, where they were able to get one pick, but they couldn't safely disengage. They ended up giving the Gold Fury up there, not being able to get in position for the FG is another one. Just these small things kind of stack up, and then suddenly Splyce is dominating.
Yeah, and I like the composition from Trifecta as well, between Eonic's Hercules doing a good job rotating around, but Weekend on the Hun Batz. They couldn't synergize that together before Splyce really came online. I think that if he maybe sat in the side lane, like nobody really tried to gank the dual lane except for Scream the one time to force out the beats out of the Jing way. There's just been consistent action in the mid and solo.
And it's easy to be a hunter nowadays, isn't it? You don't have to worry about pressure in the dual lane for the most part. But Splyce are the ones that grabbed game one in pretty dominant fashion. Maybe the Deaths has some ideas about what Trifecta can do better.
Splyce continues their winning ways. They crushed LG yesterday. They're looking like more of the same here today. And Trifecta looked like they were battling a little bit here in this game, Taco. It closed out very, very quickly. I mean, what went wrong for Trifecta?
I think the Kumbhakarna pick was just a little bit too restricting for Trifecta because they never really got a chance to utilize that Fear No Evil from Weekend. Every single time he tried to approach the backline, he was immediately met with an epic uppercut. And it wasn't just Weekend. I mean, Eonic was meeting a fairly similar fate. It just felt like Trifecta also had a lot of issues looking for disengages around fights that didn't go their way initially because of all the non-stop slow applications from Venenu on that Muzen Cobb as well.
Yeah, it just was hard to deal with. So much CC, so much damage at the same time. CycloneSpin gets to basically have a free lane with the Chronos again, and you just can't give him those magical hunters, it feels like right now. I mean, the Splyce team is really clicking on all cylinders, and I think that the points that Finch and Tolly were just talking about where they're, you know, there's a Gold Fury fight that doesn't quite go their way, the Fire Giant they aren't quite there in time for. I mean, this is what Splyce does to you these days. You need to be ready for those, especially Fire Giant fights, but all the objective fights, they've really done a good job of honing in on those.
And I think it's also been made clear from Splyce that they have full intention of just pulling the objectives as soon as they feel comfortable. And that might not necessarily be at a pacing that's strong for the opposition. For Trifecta, I don't think that they were expecting even the first Gold Fury attempt that Splyce went for. And while they did a decent job, I think, at looking to contest the spacing around the Gold Fury pit, ultimately, it just felt like Trifecta's composition kind of fell flat in terms of that hard crowd control.
It really did, and this Raijin pick didn't really do it for me. I mean, only 8,000 damage for Moswal. I understand that Trifecta was behind, but they really weren't that behind for the entire game. It really kind of snowballed out of control pretty quickly. Raijin just doesn't do it for me these days.
I think the problem for Moswal as well, and I don't think it's necessarily Moswal the players so much as it is that god just does not have much escape potential against what Splyce was running. The Erlang Shen, the Amaterasu, there's so much dive potential between those two gods alone, not even factoring in the Kumbhakarna's control there. So every single time Moswal was trying to use that Thunder Crash away, Scream or Baskin was right there ready to scoop him back up again, and it just felt like there was no real escape potential for Trifecta ever.
Now, on the other side of the coin, they did do some things well. I think Eonic's Hercules was pretty strong. He was able to get a lot of those picks rolling in the early game. Ducky in the early game was able to get involved in some invades. They didn't all go their way. Splyce did a good job of defending those buffs, but overall, the Osiris was able to do what you expect, which is keep Baskin under tower at least for a little bit. But I just don't know if that's your ultimate goal. I mean, getting 400 gold ahead of Baskin doesn't really do a whole lot for you in the end game.
Yeah, it was a little unfortunate there for the Duckster, I think, where he gets a more aggressive lane matchup, but Amaterasu doesn't really give him a whole lot to work with because she has, I think, a decent amount of survivability, and it kind of makes up for her lack of lane clear.
Absolutely. Very tough, difficult to solo that Amaterasu in the solo lane. So Trifecta back on the horse once more. They're in the first pick position again in this game, and they immediately ban away the AMC. Cannot blame them. That pick for Venenu, I mean, he did, what, 17,000 player damage or something like that last game? Just an absurd amount, and they immediately take it away. They won't let Cyclone play the Freya either, which means that RDO that they banned in game one is open and available here for Trifecta if they want it.
Have a feeling that the Trifecta might try to run it back. I would prefer to see a Chronos selection, though, for Trifecta in that first pick spot, but taking Chronos means that Hercules would be left open, and it seems as though Trifecta is a little bit more concerned about Aror having one of his more signature picks.
Yeah, and the RDO can do pretty well against the Hercules, right? I mean, that cripple field can give him some certain problems, but I imagine Splyce is just going to run it back. Erlang, Chronos, certainly on the table here, and that's exactly where they're going. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. These two picks were absolute handfuls for Trifecta in game one.
Especially when you consider that Erlang and Chronos, they're just so flexible. You don't really know what Splyce's intentions are with those 2 picks alone. You can assume that Erlang might be for Scream and the Chronos is going to be for Cyclone, but there's no guarantee as of right now. And Trifecta as well seem like they're a little interested in a mild, salty run back, but I'm just not sold, especially not with that RDO coming through for Splyce now, because the Cripple Field, like you already said, Aggro, is just going to limit the Hercules almost in the same way as a Kumbhakarna would.
Yeah, I mean, getting rid of the AMC is really good here still, but I don't know. I don't know that Trifecta's comp really did it for me. I mean, overall, these 3 picks I think were fine. So maybe if they switch up the mid-jungle selections, get away from the Raijin, go for something a little bit different there for Moswal in the mid lane, and then he doesn't have to worry about AMC poke damage throughout the entire game, that could be a recipe for success.
I just think that the Muzen Cobb was misleading of a issue for Trifecta, because while the AMC definitely contributed to a lot of Splyce's rundown potential against Trifecta, I don't think that it was the Muzen Cobb that was exclusively carrying Splyce. That felt to me a lot more like Aror and Scream having so much utility and setup potential that was really allowing Venenu to profit so heavily.
It's a good point. No Kumbhakarna this game, though, is RDO the selection for Splyce. So they could put that RDO in the solo lane and then go with a Kumbhakarna in support again. RDO has definitely been more of a support character as of late than a solo laner, though, so we'll see if Splyce decides to buck that trend. As Trifecta sticking with their ban that they had in that slot last game, they go with the Zeus ban. Splyce in this spot last game banned away something.
The Nuwa.
The Nuwa, that's right. I was going to say something from Moswal. And they could do the same here, try and take that safety from him. The Morrigan was the ban by Splyce.
Splyce for Morrigan, yeah.
That's
Trifecta
right.
had the Nuwa ban.
Right, so a couple mages off the board. At least potentially, here again, Trifecta could be looking back at what Venenu is going to do because they don't have to worry about the AMC this time around.
I think it also makes it a little bit easier for Moswal not having to worry about that Muzen Cobb. Maybe doesn't put as much pressure onto Moswal to try and select a mid lane mage that just clears the way. Because for me, that's really all Raijin does right now. He can clear waves really well, he can deal a decent bit of damage, but at a competitive level of play, it feels fairly difficult to try and establish a true lead with Raijin because of how punishable he is after the Thunder Crash. And some gods that I think Moswal could maybe lean towards instead would be like the Nox or even the Vulcan could prove to be some good looks here for Trifecta. I like the Vulcan because of the meatball interrupt potential for the Erlang and turret to deal with RDO up close and personal.
I was thinking Nox for Splyce here. I mean, they still have good CC with Erlang, Chronos, RDO. Hercules can really struggle against that level of lockdown. All warriors really do struggle against Nox, by my estimation, so I think that could be something that Splyce should have their eyes on for the mid lane. Venenu, his picks, he's been focused out in these picks and bans a pretty decent amount, even by his own side. Merlin, Morrigan, both in his god pool, and then Zeus, Nuwa, AMC, all focused on Splyce's mid laner.
Arguably even Freya could be taken out from Venenu's god pool there. And while I like the idea of Nox first place, I feel like Agni is so underutilized. Because he brings a lot of important area control, and I would like to see an Agni pick for Trifecta most likely, as opposed to Splyce. I think that Splyce has a decent amount of setup and control already between their first 3 pick selections. A Nox would definitely double down on that crowd control factor, though, and really, I think, make it painful for the Osiris or the Hercules.
Splyce could go and wait on Venenu's selection and pick the Amaterasu for Baskin here if that's what he wants. I imagine that he would want to run back that same lane matchup where he was able to have such a good late game presence without too much late or early game pressure. I feel like that's on the table here, but it's actually going to be Naja. So is this RDO solo Naja support?
Could be Erlang solo, RDO support, and Neja in the jungle.
Could be.
I think the fact that Erlang, RDO, and Neja are so interchangeable within Splyce's roster is going to throw Trifecta for a bit of a loop here, because it's not easy trying to draft into a team that's so flexible.
No, it is not. And now Trifecta kind of left scratching their heads on which direction they want to go now. It's only a jungler in a mid laner. I guess Hercules could flex into jungle, though I don't think we will see that. Circuit on the table here. I mean, it's risky against the RDO because of the cripple field, but it also does pretty well against RDO. It's shutting her down with that healing.
It could be a decent choice, but I don't know that Trifecta necessarily want to risk the Circuit with that cripple field, and even Chronos on that stop time, Erlang with the turtle form knockup. There is multiple ways for Splyce, I think, to restrict the Circuit and her heavy mobility towards that back line. Daji, I think, is a really smart option here, though, for Trifecta. That Powwow going to be fairly detrimental against the RDO and the Erlang.
No surprise to see Moswal go back to the old faithful Apwash in the mid lane here for Trifecta. I agree. Dodgy, Apwash, defensive, has some offensive capability. I like the way that Trifecta has gone with this composition. They've got some beads burners, good AoE damage. Their single target damage could potentially be lacking, but Dodgy and Jing together can do quite a bit of damage. So I like the way that Trifecta's gone, and Splyce are going to finish off their draft with a Discordia. More so potentially for the passive for CycloneSpin or for Baskin on the side lanes, but still provides a decent amount when it comes to the team fights as well.
I also really like Discordia because of the Golden Apple to deal with Outwash. Outwash won't be as safe in the back line if that Golden Apple is able to find the sniper shot through.
That's true. Plenty of long range on that Apple for Discordia. Splyce looking to continue their run of dominance. They're on a 4-game winning streak at the very least from yesterday, and even before that, they won 2 in a row up against Space Station, so they've been looking hot as of late, looking to continue here in Game 2 up against Trifecta.
And I imagine they'll be able to. Splyce looked so strong in game number 1. Really, in a game where Trifecta was pretty close with them for like 18, 17 minutes or so, and then Splyce get a couple objectives, and suddenly the game's over.
That's what happens when Aror gets the frenzy and makes those blink plays against the Hunbats that just didn't have those purification beats. The Osiris pick yet again from Ducky last game around. They try to go for that second blue buff invade, but losing Weekend early in that engagement, I think discouraged Trifecta from continuing that pressure. So we'll see what Ducky is able to do in game number 2.
Yeah, that's where they were trying to use some of the pressure that putting Ducky in a winning matchup would get them, and unfortunately, it just did not quite work out for them. So into game 2 we go. Weekend should have a little bit more safety. He's elected for the beads right away this time, and the Dodgy can kind of go up onto the Powwow and reposition, but he'll lose some of that team fight control.
It's funny how in game number 1, playing a god that has no CC immunity, he opts for the blink. Game number 2, plays a god that does have it in their kit, goes for the beads anyway. Doubling down on safety this time around, not wanting to get outclassed again.
And putting Ducky back on this Osiris in the solo lane and seeing if he can make this matchup work for him. The only problem is Baskin has gone aggressive as well. He's got the Naja for himself. I'm very interested to see how he's going to build this for the solo lane. It'll kind of be not too dissimilar, I imagine, from how you might build him in the jungle nowadays, or a little bit less tanky probably than support.
I'm expecting at least a Blackthorn's Hammer.
Sure.
Probably Void Shield. Trying to synergize with Scream on the Erlang Shen wouldn't be a bad idea.
Eonic, though, lands an early driving strike. The response from Aror is to look for the roots in the early game. But Ducky and Eonic absolutely playing these two characters correctly. These warriors love a skirmish here in the jungle, trying to bully Splyce away from their blue.
Especially when Ducky is already with his passive all the way up. Good ring bounce coming through. Out of Baskin, Eonic very low.
But Aurora is turning things around on him. First blood for Splyce, and now Ducky isolated in the 1v2. This is so different from what we normally see over here in this dual lane. Baskin and Aurora coming out on top and taking down Trifecta.
They have 2 great early game gods, but they're fighting into a Naja Finch, even though...
The ring bounce,
yeah, even though you are playing warriors, the ring bounce shreds the protections that you normally would receive this early in the game, and even with the Osiris passive mitigating 16% physical damage, 8% on the magical side, still not enough to win this 2-on-2.
Such a strong fight from Splyce early, and clearly they recognize that was one they can win. I like the idea from Ducky and Eonic, man, trying to play aggressively with these aggressive picks, but that's about as bad as that can go for you in terms of an early game start. And Eonic's moved on entirely, now showing some face here in the middle lane just to try and find some farm.
He needs it. Still level 1. This is not the best start whatsoever for not only Eonic, but the rest of Trifecta. Still 3-way splitting mid. This is a problem, being able to cripple out Moswal. This is why Venenu actually had that 3-level lead, now that I think about it, in game number 1, is because it was only 2-way split. Scream trying to really min-max this farm. We can doing a good job in terms of continuing winning the Assassin's Blessing stack race, but not in regards of just overall farm.
So blue buff control goes to Splyce in the right, and mid lane control goes to Splyce in mid, obviously. Like you said, the Trifecta being forced to split this wave a bit suboptimally. I mean, Eonic's still level 1 even now. So this farm can certainly be hard to come by for these supports sometimes, and Eonic no exception. Baskin picks this aggressive Naja onto the solo lane, and look at that. It's rewarded right away.
It's so scary to think that Splyce is a team that can just flex Naja casually in the solo lane. Even though there are other players that's done this in the past, Deathwalker comes to mind.
Sure.
This is still a great strength for Splyce against any team.
Yeah.
Not saying that they're only going to do this against Trifecta, because they can bring this out against the likes of Dignitas, Rival, Pittsburgh Knights, and still make it work because the meta allows the Naja to be played in the solo lane. That 2v2, if you can squeeze a Naja there, whether it's support or the solo lane, you're going to get 2 quick kills. I'll take Naja solo lane as well.
Yeah, me too, man. I mean, and what makes it so strong is that they can flex it to 3 different spots. Not just a viable sort of flex, but like they're all 3 game-changing players with Naja. Aror, Scream, and Baskin, I mean, in that regard. So it's so hard if you're on the other side to know where some of these picks are going. It's one of the things I think makes Rivals so strong, is that they are such a flexible team and that they can kind of play different things. Splyce showing some of that here too.
And yet again, Ducky having the Osiris is not able to do anything with the idea that Trifecta are trying to put him in a winning position because of that failed gank. And as a result, Splyce, with those 2 kills, with 2 Totem of Coup, stripping away the blue buff as well, the one time it's actually Baskin with the lead where he shouldn't have this kind of a lead. Naja is more of a god that you're looking for people's mistakes to capitalize off of it, but it just happened too early in the laning phase.
It's helped out a lot now for Baskin, who's already got his Talaria boots finished. This is just a true staple of the way Baskin likes to play the solo lane with his Warrior Tab, or not Warrior Tab, excuse me, Warrior's Blessing already finished, is that he doesn't like to go to the teleport. He's got the Talaria boots for some extra movement speed, and then the Purification beats for that safety.
Normally he goes for a more aggressive relic outside of the teleport, but against the dodgy, you're going to need the Purification Beam because you don't want to use your ultimate defensively. You would rather use that to re-engage. CycloneSpin sniffs out that gank from a mile away. And Baskin now level 5 could look for a play onto Ducky with Scream around this corner.
Certainly could, though it looks like Scream and Ducky are for the most part done. He's not the only one, though, that's hit that level 5 mark, might be looking to make a play. So is Scream. He's got the 9 turns Blessing available there to him if he wants to try and look for something in the middle lane. As Moswal's gone back to the Outwash, as strong as this pick is, it can be a bit vulnerable sometimes.
It definitely can, but this is a popular pick for not only on Moswal, but everyone else in the SPL in Season 6 started off playing the Outwash.
Yeah.
And then it was quickly forgotten about after some of the update patches at the very early Season 6. But it's a god that can just peel for himself in the form of damage, and that's what you're looking for with Splyce playing Naja, Erlang Shen, a little bit of the RDO action and flavor. I'm surprised it wasn't a soul, because when you're looking at ways of surviving against Naja, if you get stunned, as long as you pop the Disapparate before the stun happens, you don't even have to beat. By the time you go up in the air, you're going to be invulnerable, and you're still invulnerable while you land to get away. But instead, he goes for one of the most immobile gods in the game, thinking about long-term either Phoenix Sieges or Phoenix defenses.
And this is clearly some comfort for Moswal. I mean, it's something he played so well for them at Worlds. A pick that can definitely work. But why not wash, rinse, and repeat this aggression onto Eonic? This time, though, he's able to heal through it. And I imagine that's largely because of Moswal. That ultimate he dropped, empty to Crypts, sent everyone from Splyce running.
So the Muzen ban from Trifecta was because of the cripple onto Eonic's Hercules. But Discordia last pick still has the cripple with the golden apple of Discordia. So I like where Splyce's head is at. It's like thinking of, okay, Eonic might be out of position sometimes. We can capitalize on that, which is why Scream goes for the blink taunt play there. But this time around, the damage from Discordia this early on isn't comparable to the Muzen Cobb in Game 1.
That's right. And the Stinger in particular really does hit hard and all at once, which is really helpful up against Hercules in particular. So in this case, where the damage is a little bit more incremental, and because Moswal almost drops a warm blanket on his buddy with that big ultimate, that's enough to sort of create enough space for Eonic to get out. Only Aror could kind of stick around in it and try and get some more damage, and he just didn't have enough. As CycloneSpin continues this weird sort of proxying thing he does.
It's funny because this is something that solo laners do all the time.
It's old, he's old solo, yeah.
They're so tanky. And you want them to gank you in the solo lane because this leads the Gold Fury with a weakness, potentially, where you have the numbers advantage. But this time, the meta is just straight up 1v1 in the dual lane. Nobody interested in touching either of these two hunters, so CycloneSpin gets away with murder.
He absolutely does. We normally see him do it on the Freya because he really likes the Splyce like to prioritize that pick for him. Everybody prioritizes Freya right now, but but CycloneSpin really likes it because the clear is so fast. But I mean, Chronos can do it too. Has a little bit of extra added safety with the rewind if he needs it in that situation. So it makes a ton of sense for me, especially if there's so little threat of anyone ganking him.
And normally you're looking for things that you can squeeze in between proxy farming. The purple red buff wasn't available, back camps neither, but this time around purple buff has respawned, and also looking to assist in the matters is Aror.
And Wowy, I think, even has to back here, so this purple buff should definitely go down. A ward even put all the way down here from Splyce to grab some extra information, and the purple buff successfully stolen. So Splyce, with 2 early kills over in the solo lane, still hold on to the lead here in this game, about 2,500 out in front, 1,700 experience. And they've been the better of Trifecta ever since that early 2v2. And now Eonic stuck in yet another cripple field.
Round number 2, go. CycloneSpin gonna assist a little bit, but Eonic getting the heal off, throwing the excavate. Not enough damage to take out Aror.
But in comes Weaken. He's been crippled. He just needs a little bit more damage. Trades his life out to kill Aror. I'm not so sure on that one totally. I mean, you really want your jungler alive and farming, but at least they get one.
They do get one, but I'll take that trade if I'm Aror. A level 7 Ardeon
Yeah,
for
I
a
think Splyce
level
are happy.
7 dodge. These Splyce are just, you know, their smile is all the way to their ears at this point, and you got to know that you're going to die there if you're weak, and you use your only escape to engage to confirm the kill, not the long-term play. Maybe short-term, you might be feeling good about that play, but long-term for the team, it's not a value play.
But Eonic has done a really good job of not letting himself be the early target so far. Moswal's been quick to empty the crypts for him as well to try and provide some extra cover. Eonic has died, you know, in that early 2v2 obviously, but in the other gank attempts in his life since then, he's been able to squeeze his way out of there.
Because of all these attempts onto Eonic, Moswal is forced to use the Outwash ultimate defensively.
Yes.
If that ultimate is still reserved, that play from Weaken makes more sense if it's added on top of Moswal's ultimate to chase them down, to discourage Splyce from maybe saving Aror, but instead, Weaken goes in, no Moswal ultimate to follow up, Splyce get the guaranteed trade.
Oracles go down in favor of Trifecta on the back end, but for the most part, this game has been all Splyce. It's been their aggression, and it's been Trifecta forced to respond. And they've done so rather well, I would say, for the most part. Eonic at the very least, but that death from Weaken there hurts. Now they're hitting an area where they had not been hit just yet. And CycloneSpin has just controlled this purple buff. I mean, this is his.
It definitely is his, stripping that one away. And even in the solo lane, Baskin is controlling this lane very handily with a 1-level lead. At this point in the game, last game, when Ducky had about half a level lead to a 1-level lead, he only had a 4 totem of Q advantage.
Wow, you're right.
And at this point, Baskin has a 6, make that 7 advantage. Almost 1,000 gold total. Once he gets the next one, it'll be 1,000 gold.
The blue buff invade comes out yet again. Weaken takes so much damage from just Scream immediately into the 9 turns blessing to keep Eonic and Ducky controlled. The Pal now lets him reposition, but in comes Aror, blinking in as he loves to do on the bear. Scream tags out. He's taking way too much damage at this point, but Moswal rotates over ahead of Venenu, and that spells the end for the bear.
A great pull from Eonic. Very timely rotation. Staying a little bit too long with Splyce, thinking that they could still make a play happen, knowing that Baskin still had the Windfinder wheels up, but very reserved about it. Didn't have the best targets to go on, honestly. Ducky using Lord of the Afterlife. He's very tanky with that 16% physical mitigation. Weaken was essentially out of the fight. You're only going on to Eonic there, and he's a Hercules.
Yeah, we're seeing the damage from CycloneSpin here, aren't we?
Yikes.
I mean, at this point, Eonic has almost nothing by way of protections. Guardian's Blessing and Tank Boots hasn't even finished the Gauntlet of Thebes, so CycloneSpin, no problem chewing through that. But totally, I mean, once Splyce can't get Weakened in that situation, once he makes it back out, and the blue buff's already down, I mean, what are they even fighting for there?
At that point, for Splyce or for Trifecta?
For Splyce, yeah. I mean, the blue buff was down already, and Weakened had made it back out, and they still stick around so long.
Yeah, I think it was just because Baskin got off a good ring bounce, so they're like, all right, let's kind of see what's about to happen. And
Sure.
I think that they wanted to get disengaged until Eonic found that epic pull to
It's
not
nice.
allow Aror any escape path. And the amount of damage that CycloneSpin is putting out is just insane.
Great job from Wowy to avoid the stun from CycloneSpin. Probably the only reason his beads are still off cooldown. Does have to use the airstrike, but about as well as he can play that. I think all things considered, Aror and CycloneSpin want the purple buff though. One more time, Eonic is nearby, but realizes this is not for him. The purple buff stolen yet again.
And the funny thing is, CycloneSpin's build is not the most damaging build in the world. Between the Dynasty Plate Helmet and the Pythax piece, this is more of like a survivability build where you get protections from the bridge item, you get a little bit of health from the Pythax aura item to give you more opportunities to use the rewind in dire straits. But CycloneSpin having red buff compensates for the lack of the damage in his build.
I think also his just tremendous experience lead over most of the map helps out too. Level 14 as Ducky's in some trouble on the right-hand side, hit by the Windfire Wheels. He does not have the Lord of the Afterlife to escape either. 9 turns Blessing pulls him back in. The Sash is there too, and a nice easy kill for Splyce at the 2-man gank.
Very difficult for Osiris to get out of that one, being that far away from his tower. A very opportunistic gank from Scream. And honestly, when you think about ganking a level 12 Osiris, I personally like, how are you going to kill level 12 Osiris? But Naja makes that a little bit easier, having the penetration shred from that one, being able to bait out the cooldowns from Ducky. I believe he did use the tether before that gank even started, so Baskin making it easier for Scream to get off more damage, not worrying about that mitigation.
And this is now 2 games in a row where Ducky's been given this Osiris, largely considered one of the best solo laners. Probably him and Jormungandr, I would think, are up there on that list, and he hasn't really been able to get anything to work from any of those matchups. The early death that he and Eonic took really hurt him in this matchup, and then last time Weekend also died around the blue buff, so I don't want to put it all at his feet, but I mean, it is just kind of hard not to notice that neither one's worked.
It's just a synergy issue. It's not like that Ducky is not good with Osiris. It's not that he's a bad soul laner. It's that Trifecta overall can't make the advantage work out. They can't even stop this Gold Fury from going down either.
In favor of Splyce, and this is this is right in that moment normally around this time when Splyce kind of turn on the gas, when they're able to go grab that first Gold Fury. They don't have Frenzy just yet, so maybe they're not quite looking to truly go into true Splyce mode. Aurora just hit level 12, but this is usually that timing when they look for it, as Wowy has to use Airstrike again.
Doing no damage, essentially, to CycloneSpin, only sitting at about 70% health, going to be able to sustain a little bit from the lifesteal of the Pythagoras piece to going for round 2 onto Ducky. Why not?
He has the Lord of the Afterlife if he feels it necessary. Taunt it back in. Has even used the Thorns at this point. Even if they don't get Lord of the Afterlife, that's great there from Splyce. It does cost Scream his ultimate, but they bait some long cooldowns out from Ducky.
It definitely has. Moswal trying to back, gets spotted out by Venenu. We haven't really seen too much action between these two mid-mages, as it's been primarily focused on wherever the supports go. That's where the action tends to be, as Weekend has also had a generally soft game, I would say. Trying to make that play onto Aror was questionable at best, and then since then he's been on the back defensive foot.
And remember, for Baskin, even though he did go with this Breastplate of Valor, he's got the Discordia passive ticking for him, as Wowy's in a whole heap of trouble. They've already forced out Airstrike early on, and that means an easy cleanup kill. Scream, the one that gets credit. But can Baskin survive the gank on the other side that's meant to equalize all of this out? He still has Windfire Wheels to disengage, and the beads to get away from the Palau. This is huge that Baskin's been able to survive.
This is why Baskin went for the beads at level 1, was afraid of the dodgy pulls. Baskin able to survive the 1v4. Can't say the same for Wowy without his airstrike. And think about the window that Splyce has to consider to make that dive work. CycloneSpin diving past the tier 1 tower, even committing to the tier 2, knowing without the airstrike that Wowy was dead to rights.
Great work by Splyce to find Weekend. They knew that the dodgy ultimate and the beads were down. Remember, she'd already used the Palau to try and lock him down, and then the beads to get just in case for the Windfire Wheels. Now they grab the tier 2 tower in mid, and they picked up the Frenzy as well. Aurora had the chance to back, so that was helping them out even further. The tier 2 tower left should fall as well. I mean, this is it, man. This is around the time in the game when Splyce just kind of turned it on.
That's right. 17.5 minutes last game. Splyce were up about 4,000 gold. It wasn't as dominant as it was against LG yesterday, but this game right here is a representation of what happened yesterday against Luminosity. The two opposite end of the spectrums in standings, where 0-7 teams not too successful against a team stacked with high caliber players like Splyce, able to really exploit the weaknesses.
They've been playing so well as a unit. Man, and how impressive is it really for both these guys, Baskin and Scream, to essentially be able to just jump back into the deep end, like getting back on a bicycle, man. You truly don't lose it. I mean, obviously they went through some major reps with these guys too, but clearly they haven't lost a step as Moswal already brought down to half HP. Scream has used the 9 turns blessing, but Moswal has used the beads.
But because Splyce forced out that defensive ultimate, they're going to go for this late game objective. Only 17 minutes in, looking for Eonic. He's getting crippled and he gets taken out.
Yeah, an easy bait. Eonic gets drawn back in. Still no frenzy yet for Splyce, but they might not even need it. They're 40 seconds away from that cooldown, and still they shred the objective. I mean, wow, he's here, but I don't know what he can do. That's the Fire Giant. 17 and a half minutes into this game for Splyce, and they're up 12,000 gold already too. I mean, just what an impressive performance from the squad yet again.
This is just madness. Absolute absurdity between these two teams. Trifecta not able to really play defense too much because they're always disengaging from the offense out of Splyce. Already only one tower remains where Splyce is going to pluck that one away, and Trifecta can only hope that there's going to be mistakes now out of Splyce as they have to play defense on the Phoenixes.
There will be a frenzy for this push this time, though, Tully, and there it is, popped already. That means you know they're committing. Ducky removed. That's supposed to be an Osiris, ladies and gentlemen. He gets shredded under the weight. Splyce want the right side Phoenix, too. It burns to the ground. Next one up on the target. Take it up into the air is Moswal. Where's he going to come back down? It's right into the waiting, clutching hands of Venenu. Wowy has to move back to the fountain as well, but this fight's all Splyce.
Aror does get pulled in, stunned as well. Gonna bear dash away. Timing gonna get looked at for a little bit longer. Eonic gets Madness Effect, gets taken
Goodness
out.
gracious.
5 on 2.
Sub 20-minute game here for Splyce. This constant pressure from their team across the map. I don't know if we're seeing anything like this from any other team. The way that they play with such abandon, the way they'll barrel you down in this, and they can do it so many different ways. It really is just so impressive.
So
Tully.
last week when Splyce was going for all these 50-50 Fire Giant plays, I was like not totally on board with, you know, how or why they've been doing it, but when they're going to be able to make these all-in committal plays with ideas of like, okay, we're going to kill the Osiris, even though he's Osiris, because we can, then I'm all on board on Splyce's aggressiveness. It's very refreshing to see.
Yeah, they definitely are calculating some of these plays. I mean, at times it might look a bit, you know, kind of spur of the moment or something like that, but every part of it is they're going into fights that they know they're favored to win. I even love the way they did that Fire Giant, where they started, Eonic has to poke his head in, and then they kill Eonic and go right back onto the FG.
Yep.
They didn't even have the frenzy for that push.
Nope.
That was just all their lead.
And Trifecta going down 0-2, not only in the set, but at the beginning of the game in
Right,
that blue
that
buff
hurt.
invade. That's a big struggle where Trifecta have to look back in game number 2 and evaluate if they have to improve their solo lane strategies between Eonic and Ducky, or scrap it entirely and look for something else. Maybe look for plays in the dual lane to get Wowy ahead. Maybe look for sneaky Gold Fury plays, which I haven't seen out of Trifecta.
Yeah, maybe something. They can't allow CycloneSpin to continue just farm all game and then suddenly rotate into fights this far ahead. That has not worked either. But maybe they can think of something in between games 2 and 3. I'll get it back to the desk, though, in the meantime.
Yeah, Splyce just continues to look insane. I mean, that one's sub 20 minutes. What do you do if you're a Trifecta at this point?
I think that was just Splyce kind of dismantling Trifecta, in all honesty. A lot of the objective play just felt like Trifecta couldn't even get a foot in the doorway oftentimes. There's just so much zoning control, I think, between the Ardio and the Erlang. One more time, Aror and Scream just teaming up to prevent Trifecta from having successful comebacks.
Man, this whole squad just working so well together. On the other side, Trifecta, I mean, this Daji pick, I think it made a lot of sense. Did not work at all. This was not where you want to be. I mean, this is just a bad fight to take. As a 2v2, Ardio's a stance switcher. She has an extra ability in comparison to you guys. And Baskin's playing Naja, who's a great 2v2 fighter in the jungle at level 1. That's just a poor decision.
I think that Trifecta may be feeling a little bit... I think that they got misled by the potential of a Hercules and Osiris early game up against that Naja. Baskin finding a really solid ring bounces as well. I think applying slows to Splyce throughout a lot of those, or excuse me, not Splyce, Trifecta throughout a lot of those attempts for disengages. It just won't really felt like Splyce, once they got a hold of Trifecta in any area, Trifecta just couldn't leave.
Yeah, you heard him say it right there, the casters, right before they threw it over to us. The Osiris Hercules, it was okay in game 1, got double killed right away at level 1 in game 2. I think it's time to move away from those potentially. The Opwash pick did what Opwash does, which is press 4 and run away, but doesn't really run away that well when the enemy team has a lead like that. I mean, Trifecta just seem a little bit lost on the picks and bans so far.
And I think this is where it can also get a little bit more complicated, because when you have early blows like that double kill level 1 that Splyce was able to find against Ducky and and Eonic, I think that it also makes things fairly complicated to try and distinguish whether or not the rest of the composition was even a problematic or something that Trifecta can try to run back, because Daji, Jingwei, Aopwash, we don't really know how well those gods might have actually been had that start gone a little bit differently, or had some of the engagements just not unfolded so explosively in Splyce's favor.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also adding complications to Trifecta as far as trying to determine what to do in their drafting phase.
Sure. I mean, the Jingwei pick has been there for Wowy. He's been a complete non-factor, though I don't know that there is a Hunter pick that he can take to be a factor. Sure, maybe you first pick the Chronos away from Splyce, but is that really what you want to do? I mean, I don't know. The first pick Hercules has not worked out, so Trifecta either needs to pick something else in first pick if that's where they want to be, or go to second pick and see if you can recoup something on the back end, because this Erlang Chronos top 2 that Splyce has been getting has been far better than the Hercules has been for Eonic.
I think I'd rather take the gamble, though, if I'm Trifecta and just go for the Chronos first pick. Cyclone has had way too much success on this Chronos already in just 2 games, and the pacing is only getting faster as well for Splyce, because the more large that these leads are amassing to early on, the more confident that's building in Splyce as well.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. So Trifecta do end up taking that second pick this time around. Makes sense. I mean, they've lost the first 2 games convincingly in the first pick selection, so may as well try and switch it up. I agree that they could have tried to go to first pick and gone with the Chronos. Now it looks like Splyce will get their hands on a Magical Hunter one way or the other. Trifecta banned the Hercules right away, though. They don't want Aror to get his hands on it.
But Splyce are going to make some adjustments. Instead of banning that Morgan in the 3rd and 4th phase, they're going to just take her away as their secondary ban. I doubt that we'll see King Arthur, as we know that Baskin doesn't really have a tendency to want to play the king, but Chronos still up for grabs. Jormungandr, though, going to make his first appearance in this set.
Has been banned very, very consistently so far, so that'll, I imagine, go to Baskin, though Aror has also done some work with it in the support role from time to time. I think that maybe you go Terra Chronos here. You can't give Cyclone Chronos again, right? That's just my thought process.
I would hope not. And it seems like we aren't going to see a three-peat for Cyclone, at least. So no hat trick to be done on the Chronos just yet. But Terra is a really interesting response, I think, for the Jormungandr, but she could introduce some very much needed damage in the team fights, as well as a decent bit of AoE control because of that monolith.
Cupid being hovered right now by Splyce. I imagine that's more of, we're up 2-0 and we won the last game in 19 minutes, so we can hover Cupid here if we want.
Cupid could bully Chronos in that laning phase. Could even be mid for Venenu. I mean, it's not like Venenu is super unknown for picking hunters in that mid lane. I think that a lot of our mids right now actually have a decent time flexing into those physical god choices.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind an AMC pick here for sure. Erlang seems to make the most sense to me, though. Go Erlang and AMC. AMC can have a difficult matchup against the Terra at times, because if he gets rooted, it's hard for him to get away. But at the same time, in order to do the root, you have to dash, and AMC can stop that with a stinger.
Erlang as well can also try and pin Terra into place, but Trifecta, they're not ready to abandon this Osiris dream just yet. They're going to try to run it back one more time for Ducky over there in solo, and hoping that 3rd time's the charm this go around, aggro, because if not, Trifecta's going to find themselves in a whole world of trouble. Even if the Jormungandr isn't intended for Baskin in that solo lane, I still feel as though the other factors surrounding Splyce's current 3 picks are more than enough to deal with this Osiris, or at least limit his impact in the team fights.
Yeah, I just don't love the idea of giving Baskin the exact same lane matchup 3 games in a row. I mean, Osiris is better against Jormungandr than he was against the Ama, I think, or the Naja, so maybe that's worthwhile. But you give Baskin the same look 3 times in a row, you're not pitching to Mike Trout 3 fastballs in the same spot. You're just setting yourself up for failure.
And it's not even to say that this Jormungandr is going to be for Baskin in that solo lane. Baskin possibly might not even have his pick choice just yet because there's no guarantee that the Erlang is going to be for Scream either. So Trifecta, I think, a little bit with their backs against the walls here. But the Jing ban out seems relatively wise because
Smart.
if that is a Jormungandr in the solo lane, that does make it so Splyce has a little bit of flexibility for opting for a double physical hunter comp.
Yeah, I'm looking for something like the Hachiman now for CycloneSpin. He could take the AMC himself and leave Venenu to go with a more traditional mage. Zeus has been banned out quite a bit so far today because of the AMC. Trifecta has not elected to ban that, assuming the AMC is going mid. But maybe you can bamboozle him a little bit.
What if it was Zeus of Wheelish to finish things off here for Splyce? I think the Wheelish pick I'm a lot more skeptical on because it seems very likely that this Erlang is intended for Scream.
Sure.
But the Zeus pick for sure could definitely be devastating against Trifecta, especially since Terra gives some pretty ideal bounce opportunities.
She does, but now with the Ravana locked in, I mean, that is one of Zeus's worst matchups for sure, though I don't know who has a good matchup against Ravana in the mid lane. He kind of eats mid laners for breakfast. That's what he does best. Certainly a good matchup into Poseidon, though that hasn't stopped Splyce from hovering over that selection. This could be Poseidon ADC a la Funballer for Renegades. Not necessarily gonna move AMC over to the dual lane.
I'm not going to abandon that idea just yet either. I think that it's fair to say, especially since Splyce had the 2-0 lead, it's safe to be experimental now. Although I'd imagine that they don't want to risk any match losses either because as Kabam mentioned in that pregame interview, every single point counts right now for MSI.
Mid-season invitational looming and the plus-minus on those game wins and losses certainly relevant, so can't disagree with you. Kumbhakarna seems to be a little bit more, understandable, I would say, in this draft. And I imagine that's where Aror is going to want to go. That CC, again, could rear its ugly head. It certainly gave Trifecta problems just a couple games ago.
Nuwa might not be a half-bad option, though, to deal with this Ravana. If you want to create some space for Mystic Rush, no better way than going straight into the sky because of Fire Shards. I also think that the Fog for Nuwa could be relatively strong in terms of preventing the Ravana from having guaranteed root vision.
Could also be Nuwa ADC. Doesn't necessarily have to be in the mid lane, I think. I mean, do you want to pick something this low pressure against Chronos, though, in that lane?
I think that that's fair. Chronos might have an opportunity to play a little bit aggressive into the Nuwa throughout the laning phase, but at the same time, Nuwa with those clay minions, she's got fairly safe clear as well, I think. It's not going to outclear the Chronos by any means, but when you have Scream on the Erlang Shen and Venenu possibly on that Muzen Cobb, there's enough pressure from the mid lane, I think, to prevent guaranteed purple buff invades for Trifecta.
Moswal looking for his pick to round out the draft for Trifecta. They need a mid laner. They could put Chronos there, but that doesn't seem like a Moswal god to me. He likes the big AoE coverage, the long-range damage occasionally with gods like Thoth and Ra. I don't think Chronos seems to be his type.
I just keep drawing myself back to Agni every single time. I think that Agni would also probably be one of the better mid laners for trying to deal with an Muzen Cobb and the Nuwa at the same time. There's still that zoning presence, but I also wouldn't mind a possible Habois potentially there for Trifecta, and it brings, I think, an important amount of burst damage that Trifecta could be missing out on. And I know that sounds crazy to say because it's Osiris and Ravana, but you have to keep in mind how well Splyce handled this Osiris last game.
Poseidon being hovered now on the other side for Trifecta. I like the idea of a Poseidon here, and that is going to be their pick. Good against gods like Erlang Shen. Jormungandr has a lot of problems up against him because he's dazed by that Whirlpool. That's a big deal, and you've got great CC set up for that Whirlpool. You don't even have to use the Kraken a lot of the time. I like the pick, but is it enough? I mean, Trifecta has just been getting trounced thus far.
On paper, this is probably Trifecta's best draft yet this set, though. As for
Agreed.
whether or not it's going to be enough to get the job done, I think that that's something we'll just have to let the gameplay decide.
It's gonna be interesting to see because Splyce has looked unstoppable as of late. They haven't lost a game in what feels like an eternity, and they're going up against a Trifecta who hasn't won a game in what feels like an eternity. We'll see if that script gets flipped here in game number 3. Let's throw it over Finch and Tully for the action.
Thanks again, Aggro and Taco. Absolutely is Finch and Tola here. Splyce and Trifecta battle it out once more. Trifecta truly with their backs against the wall here, Tola. I mean, they gotta find a way to get this win and keep this set going.
And they're running the Osiris back again for Ducky.
Yeah.
And with Terra on Eonic, a more passive matchup than the last game of the Osiris Hercules, I'm expecting maybe to see some early pressure from Eonic's Terra, where at the beginning of the split up against even Pittsburgh Knights, he was being a nuisance at that speed buff, trying to steal it away, because the 2v2 is not going to go Trifecta's way.
No, not this time, right? Not with the Terra over there working along with him in the solo lane. The Jormungandr Kumbhakarna is pretty scary. They've got a decent amount of damage and control in that early skirmish, so we'll see if Trifecta tries something a little bit different this time. Though giving Ducky this Osiris again, man, I mean, I like it. I don't think that it's particularly been Ducky's fault or that he's misplayed or anything like that, so they're right to keep giving it to him. It's just that, I mean, at this point, it still hasn't worked either way. It hasn't given them enough.
Yeah, the strategies haven't been executed cleanly, right? Like losing 2 people to start off game number 2, never a great look. Splyce able to dominate that game in 18.5 minutes. But at least Ducky doesn't have a losing matchup, right? Because there are no real losing matchups for an Osiris. He's still able to at least stalemate the lane, even if he does get behind. He is difficult to gank, but at the same time, last game with Scream's assistance at level 12 was still a possibility because of all the penetration from Baskin's Naja, but this time around, it's going to be a mixture of magical and physical damage. Baskin on the Jormungandr.
So directly to lane, go Splyce, Trifecta, go right to the jungle. This is something that we have seen them do where they kind of give up this early pressure and instead they just go grab themselves that blue buff farm, and then they are able to come over and then meet up and grab their wave still. So this should work out for Trifecta A-OK. It's exactly the way that you would want to play this on the Terra Osiris to kind of avoid this matchup.
Yeah, but now Baskin and Aror still gets their blue buff. Doesn't even miss a single minion, whereas I think Eonic and Ducky missed 1 melee minion, maybe even possibly 2.
Sure.
And Aror and Baskin should be able to hit level 2 with the clear first.
Scream finds Weaken, though, in the middle lane, and the troubles continue for Weaken here so far. I mean, he went with the blink this time, so he didn't have any beads, anything to help him out if he was getting CC'd. But I mean, this is what hurt Ducky on the Osiris in game 1, right? Was that Weaken took that early death when they were looking for those invades. He's got to clean this up.
Can we look at what Weaken has optimized in his build? I'm curious if he has his overhead kick or not on his abilities, because if he doesn't have beats, he needs the overhead kick to be able to survive, and using the blink to try to disengage. He doesn't even have a point into it at level 2. He has the clear with the 1 and then more clear for the 3, and a sitting duck. Nuwa passive with a root.
Sure.
Root again from Scream, knock up from Scream, an easy kill. First blood, not even 2 minutes into the game.
And this might continue. Scream loops around onto Eonic. Aror blinks in as well, rooted right at Tower's edge. But this Whirlpool was just enough for Moswal to slow them down. A nice 2-man stun, though, on the wall, but there's just no follow-up at this point. But it really feels like Trifecta does enough just to not lose anyone there, which screams early aggression. As Splyce now out of mana, and it's Weaken looking for the loop.
Aror needing to disengage. It feels like roots are such a good soft CC in this early game where it's like, I could use speeds here, but man, I really don't want to use speeds here, but there's just going to be a lot of damage coming from Venenus. Even basic attacks have to be respected.
It does kind of create this sort of arms race almost about who blinks first and who's the one that tries to avoid, who's the one that tries to use the beats first and gets away with it. But if we have a moment, let's go back and take a look at that first blood, since we weren't able to see what happened and how Weaken ended up taking that spill. I'm very curious. The knockup, it looks like it was into the root indeed.
A lot of damage from the archers as well. I think Weaken did get the aggro, so not at the right place at the right time. He was just trying to help Moswal clear the wave, but difficult to do when Venenu is playing the new wall.
And an overhead kick certainly gets him out of that one. So Weaken, I imagine, trying to increase his kill potential, going with this 3. I mean, the root can do the exact same thing in the other direction for them if it's the Weaken who's the aggressor there, but because he didn't have the overhead kick, he ends up falling. Now Ducky's low, and he should die here as well. Scream gets another one rotating over and taking down Ducky. It's not been his day.
No, it definitely not has been his day. I don't think he had Gladiator Shield finished quite yet. He still has Teleport up, so no, he hasn't finished it. Only sitting at the Tier 1 version, so not enough real physical protections to survive that. Scream with a speed buff, having the mobility, despite not using Mink form for the chase down potential, he gets a little bit of the Hell Shield to absorb the tower shot to get the CC to keep Ducky in place, allowing Baskin a little bit of extra damage before the tower dive happens.
And it's so interesting, the early 2v2 is magical between Aror and Baskin, but once Scream's ganks start happening, when it matters a lot more, obviously, because you'll have started to build stuff, that's when they do have that mix, as it's a route into the pull, and Ducky still does not have Lord of the Afterlife. He makes it to level 5, though. That's awesome. Ducky makes it out of there.
Oh, but he gets
Jorm
slowed out a little bit. Not going to receive the tail end of that damage, has 2 more tries.
He's going to keep looking for it, but remember, he's not taking any aggro or anything like that, so it doesn't open up the door for Scream. That's huge that Ducky makes it out of there, and now the chance of the turnaround. Kraken gobbles up the world, Serpent. Let's go, Trifecta.
But Baskin is laughing the whole entire time. He's not really fazed by that. I think that he knew that he was in trouble once he landed from the third one. He's like, all right, guys, I have no way of getting out of this one. And honestly, a perfectly timed stun from Ducky. As he hits level 5, the Judgment Tether stun after 4 seconds procs and Lord of the Afterlife, separating enough distance to make that play from Splyce harder to confirm.
Dude, I'm so glad that we got to see Ducky, get a play like that where he makes out and his team rotates over. Because this is what everyone's talking about when they talk about how he is, he is way stronger than sometimes it ends up looking on, on the tape. We all know that everyone that's in the SPL right now is an insane Smite player. We don't have anybody in here who's lagging behind. It's just that sometimes maybe the whole team does gives the whole other team and that sort of thing. And glad he got a nice moment. That moment might end though as Eonic in some trouble is able to get at least a shell to keep him topped off, and Trifecta still running. Fire Shards brings him low, but it's not enough.
Only 91 damage from the level 6 Nuwa. Not quite enough there. Eonic doing everything in his power to survive that one between his Earth and Fury, between the shell, just enough to bring him out of danger. But speaking of that pick in the solo lane, that was also the difference between Ducky only having tier 1 version of the Glads versus the fully completed one upon revival.
And to be fair to Splyce, man, that was a perfect call. And very well executed, the way they went for that gank. I mean, it was a second one that you never expect, and you knew he wasn't level 5 yet, so you have a really good chance to punish him. It's just unfortunate he was that close, right? I mean, 1 or 2 minions was probably the difference there in whether or not that whole thing works or if Trifecta gets him back up.
And the way Baskin executed the potential tower dive, he walks up to the tower line to confirm the slow and then ulti. If Baskin misses the slow, he probably doesn't even look for the World Serpent after.
Baskin in some trouble, is able to make into the ultimate though, so everything should be a-okay. Pretty difficult to stop a Jormungandr when he makes it to this form as Baskin retreats. But, I mean, that's another thing that is important to remember about Jormungandr. When he's in that ultimate and he's trying to hit you with it, it's pretty jukeable for the most part, I would say. So that's probably why Baskin had some trouble hitting Ducky there.
Especially in such a wide open space of the tower. In the jungle, even if you can avoid the hit, you're still going to get hit by the collapse of his tail for a little bit of damage.
Aror, though, finds a 3-man Mez, because of course he does. Is still in some trouble, though, as the rest of Trifecta barrel down on him. He's in the sleepy time passive, 1 more auto to at least make it 1-for-1, but Scream can't afford to stick around much longer here either. Eonic and Ducky now going to look to even strip away the blue buff on the back end of their aggression.
But yet again, Weekend sacrificing his life for the support, similar to the last game when he was playing the dodge. This is not a trade that favors out Trifecta. Yes, Trifecta does walk away with the blue buff, but at what cost? Ducky now going to get chased down.
He is being chased. He doesn't have Lord of the Afterlife, and I don't think there's any miracles coming this time. Ducky finally falls, Baskin gets the credit, and this is exactly the point that you're making. This is particularly why you don't want to trade the jungler for support, because look where Scream is. I mean, he's still on the map getting farm, and they don't even win the fight anyway. They do at least get the blue buff to Trifecta, but it's just not enough.
And a Ravana that falls behind just feels almost utterly incapable of making these offensive plays. You need to rely on your level lead to be able to get more damage on your Prada onslaught. Without this level lead, the health scaling from Venenu is enough to buy him enough time to go up into the fire shards, to have a little bit of a window to drop the clay golems, shining metal for the self-peel. So Weekend needing to be more methodical about not ways to get the kills, because he's very good about doing that.
Right.
It's ways about how to disengage after the fact.
And that's the thing. I mean, getting the kill, while it's not easy, it is much easier than getting kills where you'll live on the back end and safe kills. So that is sort of that next step, right, is being able to find those windows where you can grab those kills and still get back out so you can keep on moving. It is easier when your team's able to establish some pressure, but when all the time the focus is always on you because you're the only thing kind of happening on the map, that does make it so much harder.
And the thing is, Weekend is very well known for his playmaking opportunities. Hold that thought though, Aror trying to disengage. Looks like the epic uppercut was enough. And Weekend specifically on his jungle presence alone. He has a lot of first bloods, getting 4, being tied with Adapting, right? So they do have a lot of similarities in terms of their playmaking, but the difference is between him and Adapting is their KDA. Weekend having way more deaths on the backside, whereas Adapting having less.
It's like a basketball player where they might both be getting the same number of points, but who's doing it on fewer shots, right? Is sort of the comparison to that one. So far, Weekend has a little bit to clean up, and really, Trifecta does in general. Of course, these guys know they're not quite where they want to be as Wowy does make it into the rewind. He shall survive. CycloneSpin goes in aggressively to get the stinger because, of course, and now Wowy in even more trouble, but in comes Eonic to drop an ultimate of his own.
Looking for the root after the fact, a little bit out of range, and CycloneSpin, a man with a mission, would not be denied picking up his own stinger.
It's hard to use words about it, man. I mean, level 12 on this Muzen comp, he's like, yeah, of course I'm going to go get my stinger. What are you talking about? And he does have the alternate right back up. Now, to be fair, I would like to see him use it within that shorter cooldown, to make it worth it, but it didn't end up mattering.
Felt like a running back, like a small running back going against all these giant defensive
weaving his way in.
Yeah, just weaving his way through traffic is like getting the fumble out of nowhere.
Yeah, really love getting to watch CycloneSpin play. I mean, he was a playmaker, obviously, when he was in the solo lane, and he's doing the same thing here, Hunter, as Wowy. Not going to have the rewind this time. Almost enough to keep him alive was the stun on Scream, but couldn't get CycloneSpin as well, and he ends up falling.
Hey, there's that stinger that we were talking about that's back off of cooldown.
That's what I was saying. They needed to do it, so there's the value, absolutely.
And Wowy feeling confident that he can step out of position there. Didn't have the necessary vision outside the Gold Fury. Look at that formation right there. Above the purple buff, underneath the purple buff. It was Splyce that knew that Weekend was around the corner, not the opposite end.
Exactly. Splyce the ones with all the information, and that's why Splyce the ones coming out the better there in that last engagement. That's rough for Wowy. I mean, without the information, in that 1v1, you feel comfortable, especially when you still have the stun that you can step up a little bit as Chronos, but gets punished immediately. Almost made it out there, too, but he would have had to get them both in that stop time.
But even knowing it was a 1v1, assuming Scream wasn't there, without rewind, without your purification beads, CycloneSpin uses beads to pick up the stinger, so you have to worry about that offensive play. So, I don't know. I think that Wowy was overzealous in trying to confirm farm.
A Muzen comp now level 14, by the way, just in case you were wondering. Red buff has been successfully stripped as well, and now Splyce controlling the left side of the map. Normally, they wait a little bit longer to start really stepping onto the gas. We saw it last around the 15-minute mark, but hey, Scream can look to bully Weekend here. He does still have that ultimate, and now Scream might have bit off too much.
Well, they use Venenu's ultimate for a satellite vision to see where everyone is. They know Moswal's way deep behind the tier 2 tower. They know that Ducky was on the right side of the map, and Scream just casually walks back with Auror's rotation.
Well, they've got a level 14 of Muzen comp to start burning down the Gold Fury. Wowy's the only one nearby, but Chronos really can't afford to safely come in. This Gold Fury belongs to Splyce all day long to add even more to their gold lead a little bit beyond the 12-minute mark.
Splyce just can't be stopped. They're the ones playing offensive. Trifecta getting their relics, their ultimates forced out. They have to play between their tier 2 and Phoenix just to survive the pressure from Scream. Wowy was preoccupied by CycloneSpin long enough to bait out that objective. It just doesn't seem that Trifecta have any sort of footing in the set.
And I'm not saying give CycloneSpin Freya, but I am saying that it doesn't seem to matter what you give him. And he just plays it really, really well, whatever it is.
That's true as well.
Obviously, don't give him Freya.
Yes, obviously you don't want to give him Freya. But a Muzen comp is another strong pick for both of these teams. Yep. In their last set against Renegades, Splyce banned away the Muzen comp, knowing the true value that Renegades brought flexible between Funballer and Dardes. So there's some merit between a Muzen comp overall grand scheme of things.
No tier 1 tower for Ducky to run to here, so Weekend's going to have to be the backup. He does make his presence known, but Aror is on his way as well. So is Moswal, so look out for the Kraken if everybody groups up. But with Weaken rooted and mezzed out, that confirms 2 hits and the epic uppercut to bring him back down. A nice kill for Aror.
Now Scream having to try to assist Baskin. That's going to get in the 1v2. Still very tanky.
Great
He's this
zoning,
level 13 Jormungandr. Eonic very low. Aror keeping Moswal at bay. He still has the Kraken, but he can't throw it out with a Kumbhakarna in his face.
Yeah, I think they might have been able to get a kill there, but Aror had Moswal zoned out, so there was no Kraken. Instead, it's a killing spree for Baskin, 3 for 0 for Splyce, and CycloneSpin pushed up to the tier 2 tower edge. It does cost him his beads, but I mean, at this point, he's undeterred. Splyce are up 6,000 gold.
Not going to try to go for the tier 2 Stinger pickup because Fire Giant a little bit more important.
Sure.
Last time around, it was a 17.5-minute Fire Giant. This time, 3 minutes quicker.
This is pretty wild what Splyce have been able to do here in this set so far in Trifecta. I mean, they can't stop this. This just belongs to them. Venenu very nearly ended up falling there, but they make it out. They're even going to get the Pyromancer on the back end of this as well. Critically, though, Wowy is getting some much-needed farm over in dual lane. He has that lane pushed up, can even threaten the tier 2 tower, but I mean, Splyce has started to really catapult this game out of control.
And Trifecta just seem lost, Finch.
Yep.
So the way that last team fight started off was forcing out Ducky's ultimate defensively. There was no tier 1 tower to protect himself from, so he had to either run all the way back to the tier 2 or into the jungle where he had some assistance. And then once the disengage happens out of Ducky, the re-engage from Weaken. He blinks in offensively on the backside, gets knocked up, almost dies instantly, dies like 5 seconds later, and this is where they get lost. Without Weaken, they just crumble immediately. He was level 10 Ravana at the time. He had no business re-engaging in that fight.
Yeah, Trifecta have not quite seemed on the same page in a couple of these engagements throughout this set. And it doesn't take too many of them, you know, to go incorrectly for a team like Splyce to fully punish. CycloneSpin and Ven can grab the tier 1, though it looks like Trifecta are going to look for the tier 1 in the solo side of the map. But they're going to need to group up here soon. The team with Fire Giant starting to barrel down these tier 2s as well, as Aror drops the epic uppercut to control Moswal.
Just trying to do as much damage to him as possible. Not enough to confirm the kill, but enough to bully him away, giving Baskin the tier 2 tower, giving the 3 Splyce members on the left side the opening for this Phoenix.
That's incredible how much damage he was able to get. The tier 1 and right does at least go down, and now Trifecta are grouped up to try and make a Phoenix defense. And for what it's worth, I don't know that we've even gotten to see Trifecta try a Phoenix defense so far. These games have ended so quickly. Moswal is already made vulnerable. He's been mezzed out, and Moswal trying to reposition, but the Jormungandr's there too. A nice stun comes through as well from Aror, but they can't quite follow up, which means they'll have to slow it down for now.
The Kraken was used, but there was like no damage taken because Baskin used the Aegis. Moswal has no room to breathe.
Aror goes into the passive, but there's no one there to actually pop it. He'll be able to come back up. Baskin is in some trouble a little bit too far forward, but here comes the rest of the team. Stinger takes out Wowy, sends him back to the fountain the hard way. Remember, we're only 17 minutes in. The respawn timers aren't too long. Trifecta will be back up before you know it.
Finch, last game ended at 18.5 minutes.
There's no way.
I think Splyce are about to go for a new record in Season 6, 17 minutes in.
This might be too much, though, totally. I mean, it's still so early, and there's still plenty of Trifecta members up, but CycloneSpin gets Ducky, the root lands from Eonic, and the Titan's still looking healthy, but in comes a minion wave to tank it up some and provide in some extra damage. Now Baskin goes in to soak a little bit more damage, but the Jormungandr gets stunned and controlled. Finally, the Titan gets reset, and I think Splyce might have to give up on it, but another kill for Cyclone.
I mean, he's just going to be fed out of his mind at this point, Finch. This level 18 of Muzen really feeling himself. Unfortunately for Splyce, Trifecta is so far behind that the respawn timers are so short that they can't end the game. The reset, making sure that nobody dies. So Splyce going to have to play on for a little bit longer and spend some of the gold that they have with this 12,000 gold lead.
Yeah, an absurd amount. 2,000 in hand for CycloneSpin. I mean, he could buy, once they finish this gold, for another Odysseus bow from scratch if he wasn't already on the charged bow. I mean, it's so far ahead that they are at this point, and this is where things become difficult for Trifecta. They got to try and find a way to just hold on. I mean, a big-time Kraken or something like that from Moswal. Eonic hitting all 10 players with his ultimate. I mean, that's the only way I can see him getting back in.
The problem for Moswal is he's getting dove by Baskin, and he can't even get in position to drop that multi-purpose Kraken. He has to use it as soon as Baskin comes from the World Serpent, and then even then, Baskin is going to nullify it with an Aegis. Whether it's the beads or the Aegis, Baskin is always thinking about ways of preserving his own solo lane life in the late game teamfights. Extending it further keeps him such a desperate threat.
Now here's the thing, Trifecta are in some trouble as Aror moves in right away. Mez lands on 2. Eonic already in some trouble, and the tier 2 tower comes down. Take a look at Baskin's build, though. If this game goes too long, are we going to see a Bombas Jormungandr
Maybe.
here?
I mean, even this, 1,200 gold item with 10% cooldown reduction. Good. Yeah, it's such a good item to try to close out the game. 2 Phoenixes already down. Splyce not going to try to dive the Titan, despite being that low, wants to make it more vulnerable and utilize this Oni wave.
Now, if they are just trying to end right here, then that's a great item to pick up. It's a great use of that item. Not a lot of tier 2 or bridge items are more cost-effective than that, so I kind of love it. But no, he is completing it out, obviously.
A Bombas Mask, yeah. Why not? Try to become really fast. But Blackthorn's Hammer coming out of Scream, as we predicted. Executioner being finished by CycloneSpin to be able to really burst down some of these tanks.
Is this rain? Does hover over his first, Doug? I want to make sure.
Pretty sure that's Bombas.
Let me see it. Hover over. Get on over there. Baskin's build. Maybe not. That's fine. We'll look at it later. Splyce, though, are the ones firmly here in control in this one, Tully. So far, having a good old time as Eonic actually has to get away from Splyce. They're waiting on this next Fire Giant. They can pull this one and push it one more time. But so far, Trifecta have really shown little to no ability to be able to slow them down at this point. I mean, Fire Giant should fall to them. Trifecta, all they can do is try and hope that maybe Moswal and Eonic can work together to find some big damage. Maybe Ducky can get in there with his passive up and mitigate enough and slow enough people down that they can try and stop this push. But it has been all Splyce really for the last hour and a half.
When you're able to get your second Fire Giant at 20 minutes into the game, you know you've been having a pretty good game collectively as a team. And Splyce utilizing Auror's tankiness. Like all 3 games, he's opted for the Blink Frenzy on the Kumbhakarna in games 1 and 3. Game number 2 on the RDO, making a lot of highlight plays, and then Baskin returning the favor.
And now Ducky is in a whole mess of trouble. The wall stun does come through, but CycloneSpin is on top all day long. He finds the first kill, his engagement. Eonic just barely clinging to life on the right-hand side, but CycloneSpin rectifies that one shortly. A double kill for him as he completes the rampage. The rest of Trifecta huddled up inside the fountain, trying to stay alive, but there's going to be minions coming in from mid and from left as CycloneSpin gets another. That's a double kill and a delayed quadra for him as he starts to farm him in the fountain. Game number 3, no way it doesn't go to Splyce.
Splyce able to bully out Trifecta the entire set. Almost a sub 60-minute game time set between these two teams. Splyce started off very slow to start off Season 6, but once Baskin joined this team, it's been anything but.
Yeah, Baskin has really, and Scream too, they've really accelerated this team back to where we expected them to be when the split started, and we thought they'd still be that world champion squad. But I think even if they're not constituted that way, this new look for the team is just as scary, just in their own way. You know, this early aggression that they're able to play with, they're able to play around the solo lane so much now as well. I mean, this is a truly, truly scary team for everyone else out there. I mean, Splyce just put you on notice.
Yeah, and Trifecta having to go home with and recollect their thoughts of like what really went wrong, because I did not see many positives from that set.
Not at all.
The opportunity of getting Ducky the Osiris just wasn't enough with how they started off that game number 2. They just got crippled.
They absolutely did. I mean, and it wasn't just that game. There were so many of them where the early game got away from this squad, right? And that hurt them and kind of limited what some of their options were when they had to play defensively after that. So cleaning some of that up. There's been too many games where Weekend's dying in the early game for what I've been able to see, and Ducky hasn't been able to do enough, even when he does get pressure in that match.
And I think the picks and bans was fine. It's just got to be the gameplay.
I think so too, yeah. They for the most part, had great compositions, but it's Splyce the ones that come out the better here in this matchup as we get it back over to the analysts.
Wow, a dominant performance from Splyce. I mean, the whole set, less than an hour of gameplay time to win 3 games. I mean, is this Splyce looking like a top-end number 1, number 2 team again, or is this Trifecta really dropping the ball?
I think it might be a little bit of both in this circumstance. While I certainly believe that Splyce are really coming into their own ever since the acquisition of Baskin for that fill-in of solo, I definitely don't believe that we saw Trifecta's best performances either. as of yet still in Season 6. I think that this team has just really been struggling to find their identity or synergy, and I understand it to a certain degree because, you know, Moswal is new to the team environment.
Sure.
There's still going to be some time needed, I think, to really get the full transition going, but for the most part, it's really just been about the early game getting completely out of control for Trifecta.
Yeah, towards the beginning of the season, their early games were pretty good. They just couldn't figure out how to play the late game, and now they've lost what they were doing pretty well. So where does that really leave you? I'm not really sure. It's tough these days for Trifecta.
I also think that teams like Splyce might not be the best. I don't think it gives the best insight towards Trifecta and their early game strengths or weaknesses or anything like that, because Splyce is one of those teams where if you are even slightly off the mark with your execution, you're going to be punished for it, because Splyce could be argued as a top-tier team possibly right now. And I think even at any of the teams from that 5th place in the standings and up, you could probably assume that if you make a mistake against them, they're just going to full-on exploit that and punish you for it non-stop. And that was just the case here for Splyce against Trifecta. They were relentless about that early game aggression, and it paid off in the long term.
Wowy gets the Chronos this game. You were saying that maybe he can make an impact on that. He does less than 7,000 damage compared to Cyclone's 20k plus. Wowy is, a lot of the struggles I think have been focused all around the map for Trifecta, and for good reason, but I think that overall it really is everyone who's struggling right now. I mean, I don't think there's a single member of Trifecta that should really feel particularly good about their level of play right now.
Yeah, breaking it down to, I think, the individual level, and maybe even using Wowy as an example, the Telkine's item 4th as on the Chronos when he invested for CDR boots and the Celestial Legion helm, so not really a whole lot of power having been built up there, so Telkine's felt a little bit like a waste of a slot item.
Sure.
And I think that there's ways to be nitpicky for sure when it comes to Trifecta and all of the individual performances, but for me, that's something that I think the team's already aware of.
Yeah, Trifecta, I mean, they make the switch to Moswal. You got to give it some time to kind of ramp up. We've only seen it twice. They're going to have a couple more games before their phase 1 is ended. But eventually the time comes where you got to decide, you know, do we think we can win Worlds with this roster? And that time, I think, is rapidly approaching for these guys already. On the other side, Splyce, they're looking like they're returning to World Championship form as of late. We've got some Splyce members standing by after their big win.
Thank you from the desk. I'm here with Baskin and Scream, 2 former SMITE minor league players now joining the SPL, making it look very easy and casual. What is it from your 2 gameplays that helped Splyce find the 4 victory sets thus far?
I think that me and Baskin, like, we just kind of bring, like, we're just really aggressive earlier in the game, and we like to make plays to get ahead. And I think that the Splyce team really didn't do that before. They were more like team focused, and I think that us as additions really bring like the ability to make plays everywhere on the map rather than a few areas.
And Baskin, can you talk to me a little bit about the 2v2 that's kind of developed now early, where it's like support and solo up against support and solo over there in that matchup? Because it felt like you guys were able to win that one basically all 3 games, and you had pressure on that side of the map since there. I mean, how important is it, and what's it like playing in that one, since it's kind of different from, you know, what you were used to before?
The 2v2 is really important because whoever gets blue control usually gets ahead. It's not the first time there have been a 2v2 or even a 3v3 meta in solo lane, so I'm kind of used to it. But yeah, I mean, teams usually pick around like early pressure just specifically for that 2v2. You see like Osiris a lot and stuff, just because it could snowball really hard, so it's super important.
And then they run into your Stonewall Naja in game number 2. I wanted to ask you guys our opinion about Trifecta. That set lasted maybe 63 minutes total of game time. What is it about Trifecta that has them struggling to not even find a set victory, and what can they do to improve upon it?
I think that I don't know, it's really tough. I think they played the early game pretty well. Like game 2, they kind of messed up the 2v2, but I think generally they play the early game pretty well. I think they have a problem grouping up and being proactive. I don't know who their shot call is, but I think if they were more proactive about team plays, I think they would be a lot better. They kind of are always reacting to stuff instead of being the ones to initiate, which is a big deal.
And Scream, as a jungler for you, what's it like when you're picking, I guess, where to sort of spend your time on the map? Because it looks like nowadays we kind of just leave the hunters alone. They get to just chill over there in dual lane, and you kind of have to spend more time on right. I guess what's it like for you when you're picking where to go?
Well, hunters are like 4 levels ahead of me every game, so if I go over there, I die to them. Yes, and I have Baskin solo lane, so why not just, get Baskin ahead, and, he'll do the rest, I mean.
And Baskin, you having so much freedom, it feels like, to pick almost anything you want in that solo lane between Amaterasu, Thor, Naja. What goes in your thought process when it's your time to select the pick? What do you look for?
I think I pick a lot differently from other solo laners. I think majority of solo laners just pick for lane pressure for the most part because, like I said, the 2v2 is really important. But I like to pick more team fight oriented gods. Like I just like to pick whatever I think will do the most for my team in team fights because it's kind of different from when I played solo lane before because during my time as a mid laner, I kind of thought like team fight based solo laners, even if they were coming into the team fight like maybe a level down or 500 gold down, just did more than like your like run-of-the-mill like pressure Osiris's and stuff like that. So I think that's why there's like a big kind of difference between like my picks and the meta solo picks.
Congratulations again, Baskin and Scream, solo and jungler for Splyce, and good luck to you guys in all the rest of your matches. We got plenty more SPL coming though. Quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.